Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to this webinar. Please, if you can hear me, kindly raise your hand on the chat button. I can see some of our panelists already here and our moderator. Welcome, Dr. Oluwatobi. It's been nice to have you here. Welcome, Dr. Stephen. Our amiable Professor Atayero, you're welcome. I can see also Dr. Nora Clark, you're welcome. Thank you all. So I'd like to welcome all of you to this webinar, Team Making Innovation Happen by EduStat Global Foundation. My name is Ngozi Ndefo. I'm the Programs Manager for EduStat Global. So the objective of this program is to unveil insights that will enable higher education institutions and players in the innovation space in Africa to reposition themselves to build the future. Africa is a greatly endowed continent, yet to make the best use of our human treasures. In addition, she's presently the youngest continent in the world, and this is a huge potential we can all take advantage of. I'm super grateful that we have active players currently making meaningful contributions in Africa who will be sharing with us today, and we'll be introducing them shortly. So welcome once again to everyone, and thank you for taking out your time and commitment to be here. It goes a long way to show us that your passion to contribute and make the world a better place. Thank you for honoring our invitation, and we really deeply appreciate. So to take us further, I'll be especially inviting our facilitators, of which we have most of them already on this program with us this morning. So I'll be introducing them shortly to us. We have Bosun Tijani. Bosun Tijani, please, if you're available, please kindly raise a hand on the chat button. Okay, I think he will join in shortly. Okay, so Bosun Tijani is the CEO and co-founder Co-Creation Hub with a large presence over Africa. We also have here today Temie Giwa-Tubosun. Please, ma'am, if you're available, kindly raise your hand on the chat button. I'd like to recognize you, or you could unmute and say you're here.
Hi, everybody, I'm here.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. We greatly appreciate. So Temie Giwa is the founder of Live Bank, and that's one of the most innovative startup companies in Africa with a global impact. And we also have here today our prestigious Vice Chancellor, Covenant University, Professor Atayero. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here. Covenant University is ranked the leading university in West Africa, as you all know, and is third in Africa. Also, we have here, last but not the least, the founder of EduStat Global Foundation, Dr. Stephen Oluwatobi.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, whichever country you're from. I'm glad to be here. Thank you all for making it to be here. I'm excited to be here. Thank you. And I also want to use the opportunity to appreciate and recognize the presence of all our speakers here and those who have come to join us here today. Professor Atayero, Nora Clark, Dr. Oluwatobi, Temie Giwa, thank you so much for making it to add value to us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stephen, for the wonderful introduction. Wow, so the moderator for the panel session will be Nora Clark. She is the Director, Entrepreneurship, Development, Higher Education, South Africa. Nora Clark, please, can we hear from you?
Okay.
Good morning, all the colleagues. I will show my face a little bit later. I'm just setting up a couple of technical things here, but very happy to be with you all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate. Dr. Nora Clark has helped to support entrepreneurship and innovation in higher education institutions, and she will be engaging the speakers in the panel session. Also, I would like to recognize the presence of Dr. Oluwatobi. Dr. Oluwatobi, are you here?
Yes, I am, and it's a privilege to be here. Thank you very much to EduStart for giving me this privilege to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to have you here. So Dr. Oludayo is the founder, CEO, Nathan Leeds Gates, a leadership management and business consulting firm. He will be coordinating the sessions of today's program. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. You all are especially welcome. We'd like to say a big thank you to all our attendees for being part of this. We really, really greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Also, please kindly note there's some quick tips and housekeeping rules we'd like you to kindly adhere to. So if you look beneath your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Please kindly use that to ask your questions and they will be answered during the Q&A question session of the program. Also, please kindly share your thoughts and put your notes in the chat box section. That will be greatly appreciated. Also, it's important to note that this webinar is currently being recorded and streamed live on YouTube, as you can see. So, and this is solely for reference purposes. So please kindly also engage on all our social media platforms. As you can see on the screen, we have EduStart Global, Higher Education. Please kindly use this hashtag as you tweet, as you make references on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and any other form of social media network. We'll greatly appreciate that. And also please try to tag our speakers. So for each panel session that a speaker gets to talk, please kindly tag the speaker involved. Thank you so much. And also please kindly use the raise hand button if you'd like to make a contribution. If time permits, we'll look into that also. Thank you so much. At this point, please join me welcome Dr. Olumuyiwa Oludayo to take us further in this session. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ngozi, and I recognize you and appreciate all of the efforts you and the entire team at EduStart have put into this effort. It's a great privilege to be here, participating again in the intentional efforts to improve competence, share insights on how higher education can move globally. For us also from Africa, it is our opportunity to begin to develop capacity for the future. It's an opportunity for us to prepare the future generation, anchoring on raising a new generation of leaders, people who can create new patterns, people who can replicate successful models, people who can improve on productive systems, people who will be daring enough to terminate unproductive approaches to work. We need those people to come on board, and all of our institutions, all of our efforts, enterprise efforts, all of our efforts, academic and educational efforts are all geared towards this. And I celebrate the tenacity of the EduStart team to make this a conversation, an ongoing conversation as it is. And I want to appreciate Covenant University for the platform they've given to build and mold this project. And having said that, I mean, Ngozi, thank you for the warm introduction of all of our speakers, starting from Dr. Stephen to Temie, Bosun, Professor, my role model and mentor and advisor, Professor Atayero, as well as Nora Clark. I'm looking forward to seeing her coordinate the session, the panel session today. And I also want to welcome again all of our participants, all of you. I'm sure you're going to be having a good time. A lot of knowledge will be shared, but it's important to know that you will hear a lot, but what's important is what you do with what you hear. And having said that, this is how the sessions will run. And the first session, we'll have in Dr. Stephen Oluwatobi speak for about 20 minutes. And after him, right after that will be Temie Giwa-Tubosun. And after that, another Bosun will start, Bosun Tijani will come after her. And then Professor Atayero. Right after then, I will hand over to Nora Clark to coordinate the panel session. And thereafter, she'll take your questions and answers. That's how it will be for this period. And I'm looking forward to these sessions already. Now it's time is 11:10 on the clock, and that's the time scheduled for Dr. Stephen Oluwatobi to commence his presentation. Dr. Stephen, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, just before you start, let me just get a bit of your energy level. How are you?
I'm doing good.
So, you're high, right? You're there. Okay, so it's interesting to see what you've done so far, and our intention is to see how much of new findings you've had, and how those progress you've made can be integrated into the daily things that we do. So we are looking forward to having you. Just like Ngozi said, Dr. Stephen is a member of the Digital Economic Policy Commission group of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, where he contributes to the visioning of the future and its implementation, as well as the development and formulation of national policies that affect the economy. He founded the EduStart Global Foundation to cultivate, a key word there is high growth entrepreneurs, to make multi-billion-dollar businesses in Africa, from Africa to the world. Stephen has published some works covering areas in entrepreneurship, human capital development, government expenditure, and innovation. He's also the author of the books. One of it, You Have Something in Your Hand, Making Life Count, and EduStart Rich, which is the latest book, Becoming a High Growth Entrepreneur. Stephen is married with children who are very great family members and friends to my children. And so on this note, I'd like to welcome you, Stephen, to take the floor. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. I really recognize the presence of all our speakers and panelists here, as well as all those who have taken the time to join us here to revolutionize and cause changes in Africa. I'm actually looking forward to the sessions by the other speakers. I'm looking forward to that. What I'm basically going to do is just to share my own thoughts on what I think we need to do to make innovation happen, particularly in this part of the world called Africa. And I'll be leveraging a lot and learning from the things that the other speakers will share, as well as the panel session. So I'll just share my thoughts in this session with the time that we have here. All right, so just by way of introduction, it's I believe that Africa has huge potentials. I also believe that there are many things that we can do by ourselves, and other continents won't come help us advance this continent. I also believe that it's people that make places, it's people that make things, it's people that innovate. Things don't innovate themselves, it's people that still innovate. All the great inventions that we've seen in time and in history all was built from the heart and minds of people. And if Africa is going to also catch up and do something really remarkable, then we also have to do the same thing. I also believe that we can create our own prosperity. We've been depending a lot on other countries and continents of the world, but we can also begin to do great things on our own. But the perspective with which I'll be looking at this is going to be from what we already have. I believe that we all can start from where we are, what we have, to do the big things that we really want to do to advance Africa. I'm very passionate about progress for Africa. And I know that as we all work together, we can make things happen and make the future brighter for our kids and grandkids and those who yet take over from those of us who are privileged to be making things happen at this time. So we can create our own prosperity, and we can do that by innovation. Innovation for me, in my perspective, is making things simpler, cheaper, better, faster. And you can't separate being an entrepreneur from innovation, because it has to somehow be sustainable. It has to be impactful. It also has to make some money to ensure that it's happening. I will be looking at it from the viewpoint of the higher education institutions and how higher education institutions can become engines for generating the innovations and solutions that Africa needs. And that to be centered around talents, people, and research. So I'll just start with Herbert Boyer as a case study, given that he also started as an academic and still an academic, but was able to use research to create prosperity in the process. So Herbert Boyer, the person who you can see on the screen, he actually co-founded the company Genentech. He discovered a method to coax bacteria into producing foreign proteins, thereby jumpstarting the field of genetic engineering. Well, he produced synthetic insulin using his new transgenic genetically modified bacteria. And following the year after he did that, he was able to figure out also the growth hormones. His work got the attention of a venture capitalist, that's Oluwatobi, who invested, and they started Genentech. As at now, Genentech has over 13,500 employees. To show how valuable the company is, Roche Group bought a fraction of the company, which is over 50% at $46.8 billion. Now, this is someone's research finding who was on his own in the lab, who created something, and then just saw the need to go beyond just generating a concept and publishing it, and saw the need for innovation and created prosperity in it. Now, over 13,500 persons have job opportunities in the same organization, and they've created prosperity, and they are giving money back to research institutions to create solutions in the same way. This means that there's a huge potential. And we could look at other case studies, like you could think of Google. Google was a research project, for instance, by Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And from that experience, they were able to go beyond just finding out something to creating prosperity in the process. So there's a huge potential that higher education institutions can also have. Another case study I would like to pinpoint here is this product called Crest. I know a number of us know the product, but it didn't just come out of the blues. This is the product that came from the collaboration between an academic and also the industry. So prior to the mid-1950s, Americans were using burnt oyster shells, ground areca nuts, soap and water-based detergent to clean their teeth. At this period, Americans developed about 700 million cavities a year, making dental disease one of the most prevalent US health problems at that time. Well, Procter & Gamble, who happened to be in the space of fast-moving consumer goods at that time, just saw the need to collaborate with an academic, right? So they recognized the market potential. 700 million cavities, that's like 700 million persons. If you create a product and you're making $5 on it, that's $5 times 700 million persons. So P&G already understands the market, and through that, they harnessed that potential, and they were able to come up with that collaboration. Met this guy called Dr. Muller, who had been experimenting with fluoride. Well, to cut the long story short, they gave birth to the first toothpaste called Crest. Now, Dr. Bola, has built wealth through that process, and now they are also giving back to the institutions to make things happen. I'll look at one more case study, and then we just move on. So this is Sebastian Thurin. A number of us know him. He's doing a remarkable work. A Stanford professor, left his work as Stanford professor as a Stanford professor to do a couple of things with Google. He was one who literally founded Google X. Working with Google to kickstart futuristic projects that Google actually had in mind. He had applied he had put into application artificial intelligence, and now we have like driverless cars that Google has been experimenting for a couple of years now. He has studied a number of things. Now, this is a professor of computer science who found out something and decided to find how to apply it, and now is creating prosperity through the means. This speaks a lot, and I'm trying to see how can we make something like this happen in Africa. What are we going to do with our researchers, our researches, the pool of talents we have? Africa, for instance, is currently the youngest continent in the world. Lots of energy around there. 60% of the African population are between age 0 and 25. That's a lot of energy. What are we going to do with that massive amount of energy? And what can higher education institutions do to make things happen through that process? So we basically need to redefine what wealth is, because the wealth we'll generate to secure the future will be the ones generated from solving Africa's problems through innovation. And that means that the kind of perspective that we need to really have is the one that sees problems as opportunities for us to solve, rather than dwell in the attitude and culture of wanting to complain about what the problems are. So even our perspectives have to really change. So how does the journey to innovation go in the context of this? So in a typical higher education institution, research is done, and the bulk of the research is committed to just generating concepts and publishing concepts. So this can be in the form of, say, a research publication or something, or an article. But how can we go beyond concept? So if we just focus on research and we have concepts and we publish the concepts, we need to go beyond the concepts. So we call it research beyond the shelf. And that is taking the idea from concept to product to market to impact. Impact could be in form of revenue, could be in form of change lives. So this is the perspective that we are looking at. So let's just reflect a little bit. Noting that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So we have a couple of problems in Africa which we can generate concepts from and actually do something with it. And as I mentioned, it's not just about creating ideas and publishing ideas. What are we going to do with the ideas that we've come up with to transform the continent that we have around us? Because truth be told, we have some ideas around what the solutions are to advance Africa. yes, of course, there's the aspect of maybe what the policymakers or the government are supposed to do, but how can we drive development from the ground up? Because even those we call leaders or policymakers still come from the people. So how can we drive such change from the ground up? So let's think a bit and just reflect, noting that there are issues and things we could call crises in Africa. Like someone said, it was Kwarama who said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, meaning we can take advantage of a crisis and create opportunities and prosperity in the process. So let's just think a bit. Now, how has COVID-19 affected food, education, commerce, or security, even right now? I mean, we are rethinking a lot of things now. How has it affected education? Smart universities now really took advantage of technology to educate their students despite the lockdown, despite COVID-19. So how can we innovate our way out of crisis? Because we've come into a particular time of the world where it's either you innovate or you die. And higher education institutions that won't be able to innovate will most likely fade off because even the walls of the classroom are gradually crumbling down. And the experience during the lockdown is already showing and giving us signs of what's about to happen. And so innovation just makes sense to be the way to find out how we're going to begin to innovate our way out of crisis. Now imagine this COVID-19 actually began in 1950. How would COVID-19 have been addressed in 1950? Of course, it won't be as we're addressing it now. And let's just fast forward into 30 years ahead of this moment. That's 2050. How will we be able to address COVID-19 by 2050? Obviously, it's going to be different from how we're addressing it now. So this is just for us to begin to think and reflect that challenges and problems are not as constant as we think that they are. But as we begin to advance our capacity to create solutions rather than complain about things and being entrepreneurial about it, then we'll be able to solve problems and create prosperity in the process to also drive sustainability. So how do we make innovation happen? I'll just put 3 things here and then just advance on things we need to install and put in place so that we can drive things more positively. First is we need to understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve. We need to understand the problem in Africa. Very clearly, these problems are around energy, there are problems around education, there are problems around leadership. So our education institutions, we should be able to create solutions, contents, curriculums that help address this. We should focus on research beyond just finding the corporate ladder to be able to solve these problems and implement this. Also, in addition to that, we need to understand whose problems exactly are we solving. And more importantly, we can't work in isolation. We have to work in collaboration with industry, with policymakers, with the relevant players that will make things happen. So for higher education institutions, beyond providing technical skills, because all the things we can say that higher education institutions provide could be categorized under technical skills, whether it be economics, accounting, engineering, computer science. These can be categorized as technical skills, but for us to make the kind of impact that we really want to make in this world, beginning from our continent, we have to look at 2 other skills, and that's life skills, which employers in Africa usually complain that graduates in higher education institutions lack, the ability to communicate, work in teams, taking initiatives, advancing things, leadership, teamwork, and all those things. So all this we can call life skills. And in addition to that is entrepreneurial skills. And so these are the skills that help you take whatever is available as your skill or whatever resource around and make meaning out of it. Because if looking at the level of graduate unemployment, for instance, in Africa, like it's on the rise. So it just tells that the typical African graduate lacks the entrepreneurial skill to take whatever he has as a skill to create prosperity out of it, because the entrepreneurial dimension is a different mindset. And we'll look at that shortly. So entrepreneurial skills help to engage our other skills to create prosperity. And it just works like if you look at the factors of production, for instance, which is just a basic idea to begin from. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneur, and I add knowledge. That's five of them, saying that we are in the knowledge economy where knowledge is a very strong pivot for causing the transformations that we need. And the competitive platform is to create new knowledge, which helps and puts us in the platform of innovation. So there is one of the 5 factors who organizes the others. That's the entrepreneur. So if knowledge is idle, and research is just laying fallow on the shelf. If the labor dimension of the factor of production is idle because maybe there are no opportunities. If land is being idle, if capital is being idle, it just tells that the guy, the entrepreneur who is responsible for employing these things to create prosperity is in short supply. So it just means that since education is supposed to solve society's problems, then what we call talent has to be redefined. And being an entrepreneur does not mean that you just have to start a company. Like an employee can still be an entrepreneur because it's actually a mindset. And the best of entrepreneurs, the best of employees are the ones that think entrepreneurially. So we need to kind of like change our approach because it's about people all the same. The changes can't just happen by themselves. It's about people. And I'm hoping that this session, Making Innovation Happen, will be able to come up with a couple of things to help us drive that. So I'll just zoom in now on the angle of entrepreneurship and why higher education institutions should begin to pay a lot of attention to cultivating high-growth entrepreneurs for the sake of advancing this continent so that we don't leave things as they are. So how do we make entrepreneurs? Two things here to put in mind, and that's the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the entrepreneurship culture. So let's just begin with the ecosystem. An ecosystem basically is a support system to cultivate talent and entrepreneurs to create as well as enable them to engage in entrepreneurial activities. So I'll just use this to explain. There are two pillars here because an ecosystem is not about one person or one institution. It's an ecosystem. It's an intersection of a couple of things. So I consider that there are two legs that make a sustainable ecosystem, and that's the talent development leg and the incentives leg. So the talents here, that involves, entrepreneurship education, entrepreneurial mentoring, and industry exposure given to the students, to the talents, entrepreneurial action and exercises, actually starting something, failing at it, succeeding at it, learning from the failure, building something new, moving forward, making mistakes. Also, the dimension of innovation capacity. The other leg of it is providing the necessary institutional environment that supports and enables and permits and gives the liberty and freedom to create, to build, to innovate, and to do something really remarkable. Also, the environment and infrastructure also falls under incentives, as well as access to mentors, markets, and funds. So if you look at this grid, for instance, now, there are 4 grids here, but the best place to be is the grid A. So if you look at the y-axis and the x-axis, the y-axis looks at talents, the x-axis the y-axis looks at incentives and the y-axis looks at talents. So where you have low level of talents and low level of incentives, that's a barren entrepreneurial ecosystem. That's so barren because talent level is low, incentives also are low. In fact, I don't even know exactly what's going on. Grid B is an incentive-driven startup factory. We have low level of talents there, but high level of incentives. So say, for instance, now you put up a prize money of $1 million US for people to come together to create solutions. That incentive can drive the need for talents to even develop themselves and begin to experiment and to build and to provide a solution. We have, this happen a lot in Africa. Grid C is not a place to be also because 2 things could happen there. That's where you have high level of talents, but low level of incentives. The good thing that might happen there is that the talents might be strong enough to compel change to drive the level of incentives up. If not, what will most likely happen is the loss of talent because smart people having high level of, they have high talent level, but incentives are low, meaning the environment is not conducive. We find those persons, move and leave Africa, go to other continents to advance other places, advance other continents. But the best place to be is grid A, where we have not just high level of talents, but we're also able to provide the enabling environment and incentives to make that happen. Now, the aspect that higher education institutions can begin to pay attention to is around the entrepreneurship culture, which looks at the patterns, shared values, beliefs, norms, and way of life that supports creativity, innovation, and enterprise. So let's just look at levels of entrepreneurship culture in higher education institutions and what can we do to actually get there. So let's look at the 5 levels and figure out where exactly we are. So at the level 0 of the entrepreneurship culture in education institutions is the level where we just focus on the theoreticals and just, provide the theoreticals. This does not mean that those are bad. It just means that that's just the foundation that we need to build on because the theories still give us the foundation to build on. We need something to build on. All right, so the bulk of the effort here is on theoretical teachings and learning. The motivation is great and the prize is the professor. We need to step up a bit on that, and this brings us to level 1. Here is the teaching of entrepreneurship in education institutions. Not just for the students, but also for the faculty, who needs to be entrepreneurial about their research, to go beyond publishing concepts, to actually building solutions. So here, attention is being given to teaching and learning about entrepreneurship. It is done mainly in the classroom and augmented with some hands-on skills acquisition. Now we move to level 2. We're going higher now. At this level, it's about enabling students and faculty to pursue, express, and exercise their entrepreneurial passions and capabilities. The focus here is on making the entrepreneur, to cultivate and develop the entrepreneurial mindedness from failure and success. So failure should be encouraged here because we learn from the mistakes there. So let's step a little higher to level 3. Here, the college or the institution or the higher education institution has escaped from its isolation from reality. That is, at this level, the focus is on linking the college ecosystem with the bigger national and global entrepreneurial ecosystem to learn and master real problems to solve entrepreneurially through education and research that spans beyond the shell. And that's innovation. So we're hoping that lots of higher education institutions will begin to collaborate a lot more with industry, a lot more with the bigger ecosystem rather than working in isolation. Level 4, which is a higher level than level 3, at this level, professors become more entrepreneurial about their knowledge, discoveries and insights from research, and they're able to make things happen. So here there is a bigger vision for education than research and then teaching, and then publication, and then points. So discoveries at this level are viewed as means, not ends in themselves. Now, the place that we look forward to getting institutions to be is level 5. At this level, professors serve as entrepreneurial mentors, co-founders, supporters, and advisors to the students to scale their impact in the world. Here, professors themselves are entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial. Thus, they think differently and see their students beyond the classroom. And when I say professor now, I'm not just referring to the title professor now. If you're an educator in some form or level, you're a professor, professing something. So what level are we in if we assess our higher education institutions or our knowledge creation centers in Africa? The good news is that we can always step up on this. So entrepreneurial mindedness is key to making innovation happen in Africa. And these are the two things that I really appreciate that we pay attention to. So as I begin to conclude here, there are two things that I believe higher education institutions can begin to pay attention to, and I hope we can discuss a number of these during the panel session. And the two things are, first of all, we need to get ourselves to level 5 culture of entrepreneurship, and also be at grade A of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. That is, we need to be at this level. That's level 5, at the level where professors serve as entrepreneurial mentors, co-founders, supporters, and advisors to their students. And we also need to be at this grid. That's grade A of the entrepreneurial ecosystem matrix. That's the grade A, the productive startup factory, where we have a level of talent and high level of incentives. So these are just my thoughts. I'm hoping we can dig more in the conversations that we'll have at the panel session. Thank you so much. I'm done with my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stephen. And I mean, that was, I imagine that you had a lot more to share. And should you have been given 5 hours, I'm sure you still have more things to give us. I mean, very, very instructive case scenarios you mentioned there. Very, very instructive. I remember you talking about the journey to innovation, mentioning that we go from concept to product to market and to impact. I hear you clearly saying that crisis is a terrible thing to waste. We are in a crisis, global crisis, and this is an opportunity for us to solve problems. And you said to us, some of the ways to make innovation happen is to understand the problem and focus on whose problem we're trying to solve, because there are different layers of human beings and categories of people that we need to pay attention to. So focus on whose problem, and then you talk about collaboration. Those 3 pillars of making innovation happen: understand the problem, knows whose problem you're solving, and partnerships. I mean, I like the fact that you identified 3 core skills that HEIs, higher education institutions, need to focus on beyond technical, which was the first. You said we should also look into life skills and entrepreneurial skills. You wrapped up by making very solid recommendations on where we need to be, particularly talking about how we could make entrepreneurs, looking at the ecosystem and the culture. I like the fact that you have told us to go beyond the laboratory. The entrepreneur and the professor who does his academic work must go beyond the labs. You try to identify things around spin-offs. Entrepreneurs can begin to look at spin-offs. They can invest in startups, just like there was an investment in Google by an academic. They can begin to license their innovations and inventions. They can even go into consultancy. They can go into authorship of books. Many of them have become wealthy from their employment earnings and even from speaking engagements, sharing their insights. And these are some of the things you've shared, and we are very privileged that we are here to learn a lot of this from you. And I'm sure it will trigger conversations when we get to the panel session and the Q&A. So once again, Dr. Stephen, thank you so much for what you shared. And we thank you very very much. Now we're moving very straight on next to Temie. Temie, are you there? I haven't seen you today.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. It's going to be great if I see your face. And I mean, it will mean me seeing you again. The last time I saw you, we sat on a panel together at Upgrade Conference for the Edge Church. I mean, you possibly should remember.
Sure
Hey,
thing.
look at
Very
her.
excited.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good
Hi,
to see you.
everybody.
Good to see you. Okay, so Temie's got over 12 years expertise in the health supply chain, networking with different countries all over the world, including the World Health Organization. Her work spans across designing and launching health programs in Africa. And I like the fact that you're doing something great globally from Africa. Talk about her education. She obtained a bachelor's degree from Minnesota State University, the prestigious Minnesota State University. She went ahead to get a master's degree of international studies at Montreal. Notably, Temie is a recipient of a $250,000 African Entrepreneur Award. And the Jack Ma African Business Hero Award. She's got proofs, she's got results. And for Temie, she believes that no African should die from a shortage of essential medical products at hospital level. And her mission is to save 1 million lives. This is an innovator. This is a woman who's made innovation happen. And we're glad that you're here today. Temie, is over to you. Will you share your insights? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. I think I sent a presentation. I don't think I can share my screen, but it would be lovely to share a brief presentation. So I hope the organizers can help me out with that. While we wait for that, I'm gonna shift us a little bit from making a presentation on innovation thought, which was, Stephen, that was really fantastic. I think what I would like to do is to now show how innovation actually happens in the startup ecosystem and in partnerships, and how we can leverage partnership to drive innovation, to drive research, and to solve critical problems in our community. So I'll start with, while I wait for the presentation, is it gonna happen? Oh, great, I can now present. Just give me a minute. You know, we all know how much of a problem we have in our community. I don't think that anybody here today will be quite surprised at, the reality of.
So Temie, I think we got your screen up there now.
Yes, thank you. I think generally we all know the problems we face in our community. We know the problems that we have in healthcare sector. We are all aware of, so I'm not going to go into the major problem in our health sector. I think COVID-19 has shown why it's so critical to solve the critical problems in healthcare, and make sure that we build a health system that is resilient, flexible, and that can help us respond to critical medical emergencies. We know that COVID-19 is one of the global pandemic, one of the candidates for global pandemic. There are many others, and they will come up. COVID-19 is a first step. There would be others, more virulent, more vicious viruses coming, and they would always be of global nature. So COVID-19 is not a one-time event. It's gonna be, it's just one of the many virus candidates that happen to start this, pandemic nature of this new age, but we're going to have new ones. We're going to have more dangerous ones. So it is absolutely critical to start building health systems that are resilient, because no matter if everybody is, if everybody is not safe, we're all unsafe. So it's critical to start solving problems across our community. So for example, the problem that I wanted to sort of like think about when I was preparing for this presentation, I thought to myself, how do I show the reality of how to innovate on the ground. So not theoretical. You know, I'm a doer. And for me, it's critical to present and to tell a story of innovation from the point of view of doing rather than the point of view of theoretical. A theory. So I wanted to take one particular innovation that I'm incredibly proud of that we did in Live Bank, that I wanted to use that as, you know, to tell the story of how we innovated and how we deploy research and partnerships, both from public and private institutions, to solve this major problem in our community. And I think with this presentation, with this one story, we'll see how innovation actually ends up happening, and I'm hoping to present a model of innovation that could be useful for Nigeria. So Nigeria is a large country. It also has large problems. We are home to 9% of the global population living with HIV/AIDS. That is a fact, and it is a major problem. You know, it has a lot of consequences for our communities. The country has the second largest HIV disease burden in the world, with 9.2 million affected people. It is, you know, one of the, about between 4 and 14% of all HIV cases can be, you know, are transfused and transmitted through the blood system. So we know all the ways that HIV is transmitted through sexual activities, through needle usage, but also a huge part, which it doesn't get enough interest, is from the blood system that we have across our communities. And the problem is, you know, testing, quality testing, tracking, you know, holding people accountable for the quality of the test they're doing to the blood bags. We also know that the population that's most susceptible to need blood, women and children, particularly before the 5th birthday. They're always, you know, they're the largest population that use blood and blood products. So they are already oversensitive because of the kind of medical condition they have. And then now you add HIV on top of that, the burden is quite significant. Most bags of blood are tested with rapid kits, which are not often the right, you know, way of testing this blood. So that is one of those are some of the problems that contribute to this huge burden of HIV in our blood system. So I noticed this. So, you know, I run Live Bank. Live Bank is a medical distribution company. We've been around for about 4.5 years. We moved blood primarily. It was the first product that we started moving, distributing across Nigeria in 5 states. And, you know, because we now became this large player in the blood system, we saw a lot of the problems that were existing in that market. We would, you know, regularly we would, you know, have to replace blood because it's been tested. It has been tested positive for these TTIs, and we'd have to do a lot of work. So that really showed us the problem. And I think more so than most people, we saw how critical it is to try to solve this problem. And, you know, we looked into the system and sort of created a map of what is actually happening within the blood system in this market, and tried to come up with a solution. So it's really critical to be able to track all bags of blood, trace it, test it, and figure out how to use it, figure out that it is safe before it's transfused into a patient. And one of the first things we said is, how can we actually track and trace a bag of blood for 200 million people in an highly porous, highly, you know, convoluted system that Nigeria is? We're not the most, you know, we're known for many great things, but not for being actually quite organized. So that also is transmitted into our blood system and our healthcare system. It is highly disorganized, porous, and there's no systemic way of actually tracking and tracing these bags of blood. So we then thought, oh, you know, this innovation started about 2 years ago when blockchain was really like the thing, you know. We started looking at, you know, and I was interested in this kind of thing because everyone on my Twitter account was talking about, you know, blockchain, etc. So I studied it and read it, and the team came together and we said, okay, it can be actually quite useful to be able to track and trace blood using this blockchain system. And the way that we understood this is like blockchain inherently is an immutable database, a database that is secured and that cannot be easily edited. So we then sort of like took a leap, so innovation is actually creativity in a way. So it requires creative understanding. First, it requires understanding the problem, and then it requires some sort of leap, creative leap, to get to the solution that is most innovative and that is not common. So we then thought about using a technology that already exists and that's been used in financial, in fintechs, and taking it and using it in the healthcare sector to better track and trace the blood system. This has never been done in the world. It's the first of its kind. It's never been, it's not a recreation of an innovation that exists somewhere in the world. It was completely new at the time. Of course, blockchain is not a new technology, but this use case for blockchain was absolutely new. So we were very excited to be the first of building something like this. And, it just shows that, like I always say, greatness is evenly distributed. Innovation is evenly distributed. It can come from anywhere, anyway. So we then built it, and we built it we call Smart Bag. Smart Bag is both a hardware product and a software product. So we built the software that is powered by blockchain, but also part of that is, blood is a physical product. So we needed to have an hardware portion of Smart Bag where, so we built a tag, a smart tag that goes on a bag of blood that when scanned, you can see the entire history of the blood. So we really basically redesigned the way the blood system works. We built it and very excited when we were ready. This was about 2 years ago. We were so happy. We couldn't believe we had built something absolutely and completely new. So we were very excited. However, we went to the users, we went to blood systems, we went to the Ministry of Health across the country, and they were like, we don't care about this. Who are you guys to be innovative? Where is the proof that this is innovative? And we were taken aback. It was quite, depressing in the beginning, but we were taken aback and we thought, well, they have a point. We have to, particularly when it's medical, when in the health sector, you have to, follow the research process. So innovation and research are very intertwined as far as we are concerned. It is really critical when you're building new innovation, particularly young people. In startup, we always have this bias towards action. We're ready, people say always ship, always stay shipping, etc. But when you move fast, you don't, in healthcare, when you move fast, and you break things, it is people that you end up breaking. So it's really critical to make sure that we're moving fast, yes, we're being innovative, yes, but we're doing it in a way that is provable, that is that can be recreated by other scientists. So science and research is really critical part of innovating for healthcare. So how do you do medical research? We're a startup. At the time, we were 3.5 years old. We had never done any research whatsoever. I don't come from a medical background. I don't come from research. I come from management. And that's what I spent my career doing. So I had no experience with doing medical research. So I knew that we needed the right partners. First, Bosun, who I think is going next, we're part of the CC Hub ecosystem, and Bosun was gracious enough to introduce us to the Nigerian Institute of Medical Research. And I think that was the first foray into the idea of research for me. I was really excited when I met them. There was openness from their side, which was really surprising. A lot of times when you think about working with public institutions in Nigeria, you think that it's going to be really difficult. But with that introduction, it was really easy and seamless in the way we built the relationship. So we partnered with Nigerian Institute of Medical Research, but we needed to fund it. the third part of my point today is innovation and research has to be funded. And there is very little funding across our ecosystem, across technology ecosystem, across business ecosystem. We have very little amounts assigned to R&D. Most startups that you know across this country are not spending any money in R&D. Most institutions, major institutions do not have funding to spend on R&D, and research and development is so critical to innovation. So if there is no funding set up for it, then it doesn't happen. One of the things as we continue to grow, for me, making sure that we always have a consistent R&D budget is really critical for me, because that's how you actually build a big business, and that's how you sustain your innovation over time. Consistently. So always stay shipping for us, always stay doing research is what matters for us. So to get the funding, we went to Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson is a global pharmaceutical company. They really care about Africa and they care about innovation. So they had a call for innovation that was in late 2018. So we applied for it and we were so glad to win it. They committed about $50,000 to this research, and with NIMA, Nigerian Institute of Medical Research, Johnson & Johnson providing technical assistance and funding, and Live Bank being the technical partner in terms of actually building the technology and actually creating the innovation that is then tested by the research institution and funded by Johnson & Johnson. The three of us came together and created a clinical trial that would test, or a clinical test that would find out if the claims we have made with SmartBag is actually correct. And we're building in a way that it would be replicable by other researchers. And what's going to happen is this is going to change the face of research in healthcare. Our goal is to be able to build a system that is universal in terms of the way that a system that actually builds a smart system across the blood value chain in Nigeria. This is a brief about what the research looks like and who's going to do what, and we're really excited to launch this research. It's going to launch on the 1st of September at Nigerian Institute of Medical Research. We're really excited to start. It's been a long time coming, building our capacity to do research, and it's really going to be, for me, I'm really excited that it's going to be a good first case of doing research that matters and that solves local problem in Nigeria. Additionally, it's not just enough to do one research. It's really critical for us to build an ecosystem of doing research on blood and blood system. So we then decided to create a center within NIMR, housed within NIMR, that will do continuous research. So it's not enough to just do smart bags research. It's really critical to start building infrastructure, the system, the foundation for doing continuous research. We have a couple of other research questions that we'd like to test out, and we've now built this smart center that would continuously do research on blood and blood system. We're really excited. We're also launching this on September 1st. We're really thrilled to see the way that this center is going to transform doing research and building that R&D technical capacity to do research and development for our company and for our startup. And briefly before I end, why is this so important? Why is research and innovation, why does it matter, right? Why am I having this conversation with you guys today? I think there are a couple of critical things. It's really important to solve local problems. We know our problem. I like to say that, if you need to figure out what problems are in one particular area, just call it Nigerian. They will tell you from top to bottom all the problems that they see. We're very good at spotting problems. Now, taking that leap to solving those problems are really, often a problem for us. So for me, it's really important to solve the local problems we see, particularly entrenched problems. And the way to solve them is to be innovative and do research that then allows you to take a leapfrog on solutions that will solve these problems that you're seeing in your communities. We have to create jobs. I think the first speaker mentioned how it's really important. Prosperity is important. What is, if we want a prosperous country And I think that's what every Nigerian wants, no matter what their tribe, what language they speak, no matter what, every Nigerian wants to live in a prosperous country where anything is possible, where their dreams are possible. So for me, I think it's all important. Those of us in the startup ecosystem, it's critical for us to build to start doing the work to build a prosperous nation. And how do we do that? We need to create jobs. It's the first step. We need to employ people, create jobs across this country so that those 30 million, I think recently I read that about 36 million young people are out of a job. And those are the people who don't actually have a job, not people who are poorly employed. Those ones, we need to get them jobs. That's how to create a prosperous country. When jobs are starting, when job creation is actually something that we find important. We need to create an innovation ecosystem. Our ecosystem needs to know that research and development is really part and parcel of building the right system and building growth and building change. I believe in a continuous loop of a sustainable loop for continuous innovation. It's not enough to just look for funding. You have to build it within the system. So Smart Center is going to be an highly sustainable system that will continue doing research. And as the products are being pushed out and they get profitable and bring profits in, those profits will be translated to even more research, even more innovation. That's how you build a continuous loop and a durable ecosystem for innovation. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you very much. And yes, I am done.
Thank you so much, Temie. That was insightful. I mean, very, very insightful. That's a proof that innovation works. That's a proof that partnerships work. I like the model of NYMA, Johnson & Johnson, and the technical partner that is LifeBank. I mean, great things you've done there. I saw you integrating. I saw you combining to create. You had to integrate, to combine, and then so that you could create something. You integrated existing models, existing solutions in other sectors. I mean, you looked at something completely out of your sector, and then you said, come on, I can bring this within my sector. So some of the solutions that we need in creating solutions, actually, some of the suggestions or inputs that we need in creating solutions exist in other communities, in other sectors of the economy. And when we bring, you're showing us now that we can go into banking and solve medical problems. We can go into the some of the models they use in technology and bring it into medical and all around like that. Thank you so much. Yes, 27% already is the unemployment rate in Nigeria. The Nigerian Bureau of Statistics just released that result a few weeks ago, or was it last week? 27% is appalling. And I'm glad that the Smart Center from September 1 will begin to look not just at solving problems, but creating employment. And I can tell you, you're off to a great start already. Thank you, Temie. We hope you're still going to be staying in the room. The panel session will come after the fourth speaker, and then there'll be more questions for you to answer. Thank you very much, Temie. Well done. Now we're going over to the next speaker. Bosun, are you there?
Yes, I am, yes.
Okay, it's great to see you. Great to see you, great to see you.
Yeah.
When we talk about ecosystem, I mean, Nigerians and participants in this event, this is one chief ecosystem creator. I mean, when we talk about father of modern management and we talk about Peter Drucker, for Nigeria, we're looking for someone who is heralded, building ecosystem and nurturing innovation, nurturing entrepreneurs in Africa, in Nigeria, and taking them all around Africa and over the world. I think Bosun is one person. We celebrate you, sir. And prior to CC Hub, what you've done, Bosun designed and managed profitable business models for high-end enterprise solutions with the ITC, that is International Trade Center, HP, on projects supporting African SMEs. Bosun through CC Hub has been in partnership with leading technology giants and is responsible for many social technology projects, including GoFood, Safe Online, Lagos Innovation Hubs, Hotspots, IHQ. And today we have seen your involvement in the Smart Bag. We've seen how you have partnered and recommended by networking the solution that Temie and her team are producing. Your leadership also has culminated in the visit of Mark Zuckerberg to the CC Hub, his first ever visit to Sub-Saharan Africa. And that's why we call you a leader. And we're glad to have you today. Your educational background notwithstanding, your background in economics, master's degree in information systems, manager from Warwick University. I mean, you can go on and on in bagging degrees, but we see you as a solution provider. Bosun, it's time for you to share your insights on making innovation happen. Over to you now.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Can you give me the right to share my presentation as well? I think this is the build up to my talk has been extremely exciting. I see you're frozen. I don't know if everyone can hear me. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you, Bosun.
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. The build up to this is extremely exciting. And I think the problem is that I'm just a few months into wrapping up my PhD. So I'm going to treat this.
Dr. Bosun.
Not really. I'm going to treat this as an academic engagement. And of course, because we're talking about higher education, I think we have to do so. Not only just that as well, but also given the fact that personally, I strongly believe that for any society to move forward, you have to understand the role of higher education institutions. And it is critical that we don't mix up that role. So what I'm going to do, even though I didn't plan it, but it fits perfectly well into my presentation, is to actually speak to what Steve spoke about, using Temie's experience to remind us that Steve's theory is not rounded enough. Sorry, Steve, because this is an academic session. I'm allowed to do this. It's not personal. It's not personal. And the reason for that, I could have ignored and just move over. The reason for that is that it is extremely important that we understand the role of universities and academic institutions in economic development of nations. And there's been a lot of conversation around innovation, which is rightly so today, and how universities need to participate. But I think that participation needs to be rounded in approach. And the starting point for it, before I get into my presentation, is that everyone should be aware. So I'm a PhD in innovation systems, so I have the right to speak to this, on top of the fact that I've built innovation ecosystem.
Okay, authority speaking, yeah.
There's a bit of authority there. And so when you talk innovation in itself is divided into two. There's the element of invention, right? And there's the element of commercialization. If you're with me, those two elements of innovation, they require different inputs and different focus. And if you're developing them within an innovation ecosystem, what you need to put in place to develop those two strands are totally different. Even though innovation is not complete if it stops at invention, which means you need the other side, which is commercialization. And when you talk about invention is quite heavy, and there's a lot of role for academic institutions to actually play in invention. And we're not doing enough of that on the continent. But when you talk of commercialization, that is where entrepreneurship comes to play. You know, which means you can invent, if you don't have the commercialization, the entrepreneurs to be part of it, it's not complete. Because once you've not taken the invention to market, you've not actually innovated. So this is why these two elements are important. And why universities need to understand that entrepreneurship needs to be encouraged within academic institutions. It is not the only thing that society actually requires from academic institutions. Invention in itself will start from things such as basic research. This has been the contention. Again, I spent years working in innovation consulting across Europe. And this was always the contention when the European government started to try to get more universities to think about the commercialization of the knowledge that they generated, which is rightly so. But there's also the conversation around how basic research feeds into applied research. And if we're not doing enough basic research as a society, you will not have enough findings and knowledge that can lead to applied research. Are you seeing my point here? Which means that as we focus on entrepreneurship, we cannot afford to lose sight of basic research and invention and the role of university. And Temie's point alluded to that. If you look at the role of NIMA in that project that they're conducting, and Temie only used one example. Temie didn't also mention that during this pandemic, for instance, the most well-coordinated testing system in Lagos State was put together by LifeBank alongside NIMA, funded by Sterling Bank, the software developed by CCL. But in that whole loop, NIMA, which is the only medical research institute in the country, didn't have to do anything around commercialization or entrepreneurship. Their role was strictly on deep research elements of the work. And that's what brings me to my presentation. I want us all to pay attention to this. As we all know, you must all have seen where we are as a society, where digital revolution is indeed shaping so many aspects of our lives tremendously. So you will find that things like affordable computing is changing how we perceive innovation, whether it's innovation in agriculture or in public health or in education. Digital computing is changing it because it's not a lot cheaper to apply this technology today than it was 10, 15 years ago. You can also see that democratization of knowledge is part of digital revolution. Before, you need to go to top academic institutions to be able to access certain knowledge and to be able to innovate in certain ways. But because of the availability of the internet and connectivity, knowledge is somewhat democratized today, which means you don't need to have a PhD in a certain things to speak to it. You don't need to have years of experience in a certain thing to speak to it because access to knowledge is now commonplace. The other bit is access to information in itself. Before 10, 15 years ago, you probably need to read the newspaper, you need to go to the library, you need to do so many unique things to access certain information. But today, information is readily available. And not only is it readily available, I was at an event about 2-3 years ago with the founders of Google. And they were making a presentation and telling the whole room that their goal for the next 5 to 10 years is that not only will we get information that we need as humans, but before we need the information will come to us, which is the algorithm can actually determine what sort of information you're going to require before you ask the internet at all. So the information will come to you. And for those of us who know this, you can already see it in marketing, where you probably send an email to someone about a product, and you go online onto a website, and that product or similar product is being shown to you. This is the level that digital revolution is taking access to information. You're also going to see things around automation, human-machine interaction. All these things are changing the way we innovate. Not only are they changing the way we innovate, they're also changing what we're able to innovate. Which means when you look around you, you will find that digital revolution is affecting healthcare, the work that Temie is doing, for instance, which is now they're changing the face of logistics around how we move medical supply. Things that were not possible 5-10 years ago, they're now possible because of the work that Temie is doing. It's the same thing with what they did with COVID-19 testing. It's the same thing with what you see with telemedicine. And it's the same thing with what you see even in genomics. So digital revolution is already changing healthcare significantly in that space. One sector that digital revolution is changing that we all know and relates to the people on this call is also education. Andela is an example. But beyond Andela, you also see things like Coursera, you see platforms like that are changing the way education is done, that are moving the focus away from actually going into a brick and mortar institution to acquire your degree. Digital revolution is changing education tremendously. Digital revolution is also challenging education, whereby teachers and lecturers are now being forced not to just be instructors, but to become facilitators. So schools where you find that teachers and lecturers are still instructors do not perform as well as schools where teachers and lecturers are facilitators, because they are now meant to be facilitator of knowledge, not instructor, because the student can find the same knowledge. So the role of teachers and lecturers today is to facilitate and make sure that students can find the right knowledge and as such apply that knowledge. So I'm not going to go deep, but you can find the same thing in agriculture, how digital revolution is changing innovation in agriculture, how digital revolution is changing the innovation in transportation, and how it's changing innovation in energy. And this is what brings me to what I believe that the role, and this is a thinking that is not just my thinking, it's also based on what World Economic Forum has done some work on, right? It brings me to these 4 things that academic institutions, I've used universities loosely here. It could be polytechnic, it could be, teacher training college, but higher education institution. This is what I believe that is their emerging role in the society. And for any higher education institution that wants to survive in future, they need to be able to see these things well. You can see that fostering entrepreneurship is still there, which is not saying that what Steve presented is totally wrong, but it's just a subset of how higher education institution needs to be thinking. It's just a subset. You can't focus on just entrepreneurship. And you're going to see why. So one of it is first exploring the nexus of technology and society. And for me, actually more than anything, I think this is more important role for academic institutions, in the world today, and also in Africa more so. Because a lot of this technology and innovation that we're seeing in society, there's no guarantee that they will automatically benefit humanity. And the greatest obligation for a higher education institution within the digital revolution space is for them to provide that academic and guidance, the research to help us show that this way of doing things, that the way we're pushing the boundaries in society, that they actually work for the society, and in the long run is not going to lead into a problem. I don't know how many of you guys have been part of calls lately where people have webinars like these and they've been hacked. Children have been on webinars like this and they've been hacked. We're saying to people within the education space that technology is the future, but we have teachers in a country like Nigeria that we've not trained to be able to use technologies, appropriately. So we're creating a future where the teachers are disconnected. Who's going to help us realize this? The innovators don't do that work. Innovators are extremely excited about the future. They don't look at the ethics elements of their innovation. They are not like philosophers who look at the impact of this innovation on society. And we need to realize that innovation can be good or bad. So that leadership needs to come from academic institution. And it's not saying we're not asking academic institution to push back on innovation, but they need to bring the ethics elements to every innovation and help society determine whether that innovation is good for us or not. And if it's good, what are the things we need to put in place to ensure that it doesn't affect us negatively? This is an important role for academic institutions. In developed world, academic institution gets paid significantly to perform this role. Because any proper organization that is responsible will make sure that when they are innovating, they have an academic institution as a partner who will help them check. Because if they break the law or do something that is negative to society, they will be responsible for it. And that can crash the company. So it's not just about innovating. Is your innovation inclusive? Is it productive for society? So academic institution can perform this role and actually make significant wealth from it as well. The second thing is encouraging collaboration in private sector, right? There's a lot of competition out there, generally. And, so university needs to develop a new partnership with leading companies, foundation, and other research-intensive institutions. Temie mentioned NIMA. Since we started a relationship with NIMA, NIMA has been engaged now. We've done a medical trial with them on tuberculosis. Temie has done stuff with them. There's another startup that we support that has also done trials with them. There are people in the UK that are building ventilators that we've introduced to NIMA that are now going to be doing trials with NIMA. So even the quality of the work that NIMA is doing is going up. But not only is it going up, and for academic institutions locally, recognizing that innovation is becoming the bloodline of every competitive society means that by partnering, you can understand what sort of talent is required to power that innovation. And it means you can tailor your academic courses, your curriculum, of course, working with NCC, but also within in terms of how you teach, such that you're grooming talents that can immediately be relevant in society. Covenant University, for instance, is quite strong in being able to point to entrepreneurs. This may also be responsible for Steve's thinking, which is fine, but it shouldn't stop there. We need much more. Academic institution needs to do much more than just churning out entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are not the only thing that we need in society. And this is coming from me that I've spent the last 10 years of my life championing the cause of entrepreneurs. But also as a PhD in innovation system in making, I also understand, I've been a student of innovation system for a long time. I also understand that a rounded society is not built just around entrepreneurs. This is the fact. Anywhere in the world is not built just around entrepreneurs. Then the last bit is, of course, I think Steve has done a fantastic job to this part of my slide. So I can skip this one. Universities and academic institutions need to foster that environment for entrepreneurship. There's no question about it. The reason why I keep making this point is just that don't get carried away and think this is the only role that you have to play. In fact, most universities can't play this role very well, even in the West. I'm doing my PhD with University of Leicester. They're quite weak with supporting entrepreneurs. They've tried everything possible, but they're quite weak with it. But universities need to make that attempt to find ways to continue to support innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think Steve has done a good job at that. And lastly, this is my last slide, promoting diversity. Successful university spin-offs and corporate partnerships don't tell the full story. As this economic transformation quickens, it is critical that universities continue to focus on incorporating diverse perspectives into their research. So what this is saying simply, and I've interacted with a lot of academic researchers, even in Nigeria, is that the way universities perceive research needs to be diverse. You're not just doing university research for publication. That's not what research is for. It's actually a disservice to society. I always tell people that the reason why Nigeria is not developed today is because of our academic institutions. I'm sorry, this is my belief. And we can take it back and say, yeah, well, if they're not funded, yes, if they're not this, there may be a case to be made there. But part of not funding academic institutions is because academic institutions are not doing the research to demonstrate that their what in society is what determines the trajectory and the growth of society. We have bad political system because we're not doing enough academic research to help us understand practically. Let's move away from just publication. Practically what is broken in our political system and how do we fix it? How is it unique to our system? That's part of it. In the UK, I think about 6 or 8 years ago, I'll end with this story. There was a major riot in London where in a developed country, young people, mostly from the British African community. Let me not say African, Black, not necessarily African, Black community, took to the streets and they started looting shops and things like that, started breaking down the whole of London. It was messy. When the riot went down, the government put so much money into social science research just to better understand what was the social issue that led to people within a developed society to be able to behave in that manner. And I'm saying that story just to help us see that academic research, and I'm not talking about just engineering research here, that even social science research is part of how society moves forward. And if we don't repurpose our role as academic institution, Nigeria cannot develop. That's the honest truth. And the future of any serious higher education institution as well will be under threat because education institutions are being displaced now. There are so many alternatives. And the only reason why you continue to stay relevant is by being able to perform that role that higher education institutions are meant to perform in society. I'm not sure if I've taken much more than my time. Thank you all so much for listening, and I look forward to the engagement. Hopefully, Steve will get the chance to feedback.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Bosun. Yeah?
Not yet. In a few minutes.
I mean, I think it's okay to call you Dr. Bosun. I mean, just you said a few months. I mean, the pandemic has not stopped you. So, and it's amazing. Thank you so much. You talked about securing the future of higher education, and I'm glad that you told us, you added more. I mean, and that's why we're seated here. I mean, Dr. Stephen shared something, and I mean, talked about the commercialization angle of innovation, and you try to say, "Hey, young man, see, it's not enough. It's okay, but it's not enough." Because the reason why it's not enough is because our problems must be solved by rounded solutions. Our problems must be confronted with rounded solutions. And I want to thank you so much for that part. I'm excited about the fact that you've shared this emerging role of universities. You know, traditionally, universities will be told to be doing teaching, research, community service. In recent times, they started to add entrepreneurship. So, I mean, I've done a couple of work on that, and I'm going to add this for and see how much you have also left out. So I can tell you that you've also not done enough. Right?
Fantastic. That's what research is meant to do.
All right. I mean, that's not personal. That's not personal. That's not personal.
No, not at all.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, we're going to the last speaker right now. And just before we get to hear from Professor Atayero, it's important to remind you that there's still the Q&A button there. You can just send in your questions. You can send in your comments. We want to use it. I know there's a chat room. Chat room is just for us to talk, but please use the Q&A button there, the section there for your question and answer. The panelists are seeing it and they can engage even before we get to the panel session. So Professor Atayero is the 5th and current Vice Chancellor at Covenant University, the leading private university in Nigeria. I mean, he's had many firsts for him. Right now, one of the most critical things he's doing is leading the entry of Covenant University into the Times Higher Education World University Rankings. And as of 2019, Covenant is ranked as the best West African university and the 6th African university. And I think these feats are what we're celebrating for his leadership. Engineer Professor Atayero has a Bachelor of Science degree in radio engineering and a Master of Science degree in satellite communication systems in 1992 and 1994 respectively. He earned his PhD from the Moscow State Technical University of Civil Aviation. Maybe that accounts for why his perspectives about solving problems from higher education is different. He's a professor of communication engineering, a fellow of the Science Association of Nigeria, a fellow of the Chartered Institution of Administration, a fellow of Chartered Institute of Management Consultants, and he has published. And Bosun, let me tell you here, Professor Atayero has not just published, he has not stayed at publishing. He also has developed quite a lot of work, and I know some of his work around creating a smart campus. And he's also on the editorial board of several international scientific and engineering journals. Atayero is a recipient of many awards and scholarships. The Engineers Award of Excellence, one of the many ones that he has done. I'm excited to see him today. I'm keen to hear him speak. Professor, over to you.
Thank you very much, Muiwa. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can. I'm trying to hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you now, yes.
Let me start by appreciating the convener of this webinar, Dr. Stephen Oluwatobi, for giving this opportunity to share my thoughts. And most especially, let me appreciate the fact that you let me come last. Because making me come last actually gives the opportunity to distill everything that has been passed on so far. Starting from the very first presentation by yourself, Steve. That was brilliant, wonderful. Don't mind, Bosun, you did a good job. You did
exactly.
We're proud of you at Covenant. And to say I'm happy to see Muiwa will be the understatement of the year. So glad to see you. I didn't know you would be on this. That was a pleasant surprise, Stephen.
I know. We have to keep it out of you. Thank you, sir.
I'm so happy that you're moderating these sessions. I decided I will not share slides today because when I got this invite from Stephen, I looked through it and in the introduction, I don't know if it's the same thing every other panelist got. Stephen provided some thesis here that I believe set the tone for what we're doing here today, and he did that marvelously well. I'll be alluding to what Temie said. Wonderful presentation, contributing to the society. I will dwell a bit too on what Bosun just shared, the aspiring PhD. Listening to that threw me back a bit to the year 2000 when I was in those shoes, aspiring PhD. There's a special kind of feeling to it when you're just about to get that highest academic qualification, so to say. I'm sure Mua can relate to what I'm talking about here. So Stephen gave some points, like talking about educators' role in the future. One of the first things I said is the educator's role will be redefined. Very true. And all the presentations today, especially the presentation of Stephen and Bosun, have spoken significantly about it. Bosun was mentioning that he has to be a facilitator. I laughed when he said that, because that was exactly one of the things I penned down. The education system has changed so much that the educator of the future, for him to keep his job or her job, will have to be a facilitator of knowledge acquisition and skills development. There's a plethora of information everywhere, just like Bosun mentioned too. So the role of the educator now is to help the mentee navigate this sea of information. How do you spend your time productively instead of just moving all around the place? That is the specific role of a supervisor comes to play very, very significantly here. Helps as a guide to navigate the sea of information, to separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will. What do you need to do what you need to do per time? Another thing I see happening as the role of the educator, that has been mentioned too. The educator will be such that, let me just use an example here. You are supervising 9 undergraduate projects, but you're supervising those 9 undergraduate projects in such a way that you're trying to find a synergy in all the projects, that at the end of the day, they can all come together, do something together, that they're taking from ideation, that's talking about coming to the project defense and everything, to the proof of principle, which is whatever they build at the end of the day, and bringing all of this together, trying to bring them up together as a supervisor, as a team, so that at the end of the day, they can even go through the commercialization, the product development, partnering with somebody like CC Hub to help them make this happen, or the Hebron Startup Lab in Covenant University. That example I cited is talking about what is happening with me personally as we speak. I have 9 projects today. Interesting that Temie mentioned about blockchain technology. We're trying to use blockchain technology for something, trying to use NFIC for another thing. And that the last assignment given to them is, guys, we have to come together, see how we can bring up one holistic project that will incorporate your individual projects and make things go on from there. The second thing Stephen mentioned in that invitation later is the classroom will be virtual and digital. Higher education institutions must acknowledge this. It has come to stay. This is something I've always said at the Senate of Covenant University, that the time is coming when the face-to-face will not be so important anymore. So what COVID-19 has helped us do is accelerate what inertia was holding back. And I will give you an example to that. Covenant University wanted to start the open and distance learning. So we applied to the National Universities Commission as usual, so they will come for resource verification and the rest of it. And one of the conditions of starting the open and distance learning is that you start with one program. Just one program. So we started thinking, which program do we need to choose so that at least we can get it started? It's just computer science. But guess what? COVID came and it was now urgent on everybody to go on the virtual platform. So almost 700 Covenant University courses are now on our learning management system. We even consider that that is not good enough. So we signed a pact with Coursera to add some elements of blending to it so that they get like 30% blended learning. And it will interest you to note that the feedback from that has been phenomenal. I even asked the alumni to do a survey recently. How many of our alumni were allowed to come on that platform? 98.4% of them all over the world want to join on that platform. Why? Because it's not about the curriculum of the school anymore, which has been criticized over and over again as not meeting the industry requirements. It's about giving skill sets to fill that gap. And how do you get the skill sets to fill that gap? You have to partner, but we talked about that in this last slide too. You have to partner with other people that can make that happen. And that's one of the reasons we signed up with Coursera, to fill that gap for us. The educator of the future must acknowledge the fact that the classroom has left the building. The classroom has left the building, and that's talking about the learning management systems, the Blackboard, the Moodles, and the rest of it. And that higher education itself, education as we know it, has to be redefined. Because somebody said, if you can read and you can write, you are educated. Why? Because being able to read and write, you can get information on anything you want to be educated upon, and you can make progress and move forward from them. Another thing Stephen mentioned in that letter I sent to us, that the relevant educator will be entrepreneurial in his approach. I want to agree with Stephen here, maybe because I'm a pioneer faculty of Covenant University. And one of the reasons I believe our products are doing marvelously well out there, and don't take my word for it, that's from the stakeholders, people who employ them, people who work with them whenever they come to Covenant or whenever they give feedback, that's the feedback they give us, is that at the onset of Covenant University, there was a founding philosophy. And that philosophy was a philosophy of departure. That is, not doing things the way it was done then in 2002 on the higher education landscape of Nigeria, but moving a bit forward. And how do you move a bit forward? You can either bemoan the situation we had on ground then. You will listen to Stephen say over and over again, not about complaining. That's one of the processes they went through when they were being trained. Or you can just think of something new. So what are the new things that Covenant University taught of them? One is the total man concept. The total man concept, understanding the fact that the human being you're about to train is actually triune in nature. It's essentially a spirit, as a soul, dwells in a body. Why? Because we needed to work with the vision of the university, which is raising a new generation of leaders in all fields of human endeavor. So there must be something you are infusing into them that will be of the same value in any field they find themselves going forward in the future. And that's about building their character. And in building their character, the core values were kind. Somebody said, and I totally agree with him, that anything, any skill you get over 10 years, over 20 years, the lack of character can take it from you in a second. In a second. So character development becomes very, very crucial. And that was why that was infused into the curriculum of Covenant University from year one up to PhD level. The other one was the entrepreneurial development studies. Why? It became obvious that people of my generation who got their PhDs the year 2000 or before, it's very interesting to hear about to complete PhD talk the way Bosun is talking. Why? Because it just threw me back to that dichotomy, that debate that has always been there. Esoteric research or life applicable research. It has always been an issue. People are always arguing about it. Covenant University moved forward. We're about life applicability. But there's a place, a very, very strong place for esoteric research. That is what Bosun was alluding to when he talked about innovation ethics. People like Euler, people like Pythagoras and the rest of them, when they were thinking the number theory, they would have stopped working on it if they ever had the inkling at the back of their mind that someday in the future, it will become the basis for mathematical algorithms that can develop apps that are useful to the society. Why? Because they valued esoteric research. They believe that if you bring applicability to it, you have watered it down. So it's interesting that this type of discussion is coming on now. The relevant educator will be one, very, very important. Bosun mentioned something where he's doing his PhD. He mentioned that they are not so good at bringing the products of their research to commercialization. I believe that's a very big fault which needs to be addressed. That is a very big fault which needs to be addressed. Somebody will say every Wozniak needs a Steve Jobs, but what stops Wozniak for being Steve Jobs? You can be the two together at the same time. So Steve Jobs is gone now. Wozniak is not moving forward. Though the valuation of Apple just doubled, I was told, it's now $2 trillion. Why? Because there's another entrepreneur at the head of affairs there. If sentiment has been brought in and they say, oh, there's a co-founder here, his name is Wozniak, let him now hide Apple, Apple will be dead today. And the amount of research Apple is doing, I believe no institution on planet Earth today can match it. Why? Because they just don't have the way, no government can match it. We're talking about a company with a valuation of twice the GDP of Africa without money, but that is the product of entrepreneurship affecting research. Going forward, I try to answer the main question of the day, which is, what should higher education institutions do? Like I said, a lot have been said here. I just mentioned some things, try to validate them with examples, and we talk more about them later. The very first thing I say very, very important is that higher education institutions, especially higher education institutions in Africa, have to be open-minded and receptive of new paradigms. They have to be open-minded and receptive of new paradigms. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of things in the benchmark minimum academic standards of universities. Dr. Oluwatobi will understand this, being an academic himself before he went into the industry. Dr. Oluwatobi is still very much here. I believe if, as the Vice Chancellor of Covenant University, I told Steve, what do you want to do with ECHO 321 if you did not have the regiment of the benchmark minimum academic standard? That 30 units, I'm giving it to you, develop a curriculum for ECHO 321. I'm sure it will come up with something that will have nothing or very little to do with the BMAS as we have it today. But we have to work with that BMAS. So we're looking for a way around that. How do you do the needful while doing the necessary? So what did we do? One of the things we did was partner with this partnership with Coursera, because that helps us to fill that skills gap, very, very significant skills gap that we're finding tough to fill just because of the unit loads from the BMAS. This becomes very, very important. So the higher education institutions of the future, if they want to remain relevant, must be totally open-minded and be receptive of new paradigms. Another thing they need to do is they should encourage innovative disruptions as a necessity for sustainability and growth. Innovative disruptions as a necessity for sustainability and growth. This becomes very, very important. Innovation is one of the things we do. Yes, that comes from the basic research. But it should be encouraged in such a way. And how do you encourage it? It has just been mentioned now by one of the panelists, I believe Bosun it was, that the problem, and what he was alluding to is the problem of publish or perish in the Nigerian education system. That people are just churning out papers, they don't care what those papers can do. They need it for promotion and things like that. But another way we can go about that is make sure that any paper you're publishing, you tie it to something that solves a problem. And a good way to make that happen now is the SDGs. And Covenant University is working very seriously with these because we're in the SDG rankings. Actually, we're one of the first institutions to go into the rankings last year when the rankings came out. And we went like some spaces up in this year's SDGs, going into 12 of the SDGs. So you can tie research output to SDG solutions by which it becomes measurable, because that's a measure of impact of research. It is a measure of impact of research. It will interest you to note that to even rank institutions in these SDGs, still, Times Higher Education still has to go to Scopus, look at the publications and see how those publications are affecting the society with proofs. We need to submit proofs. What are the things you are doing specifically to address situations in the country? Another thing they need to do is to engage industry experts and technocrats as core resource persons for curriculum development. The way curriculum is developed up till now is just an academic business. I was there when we're developing the BBAS for communication engineer. It's just professors. NUC brings professors around, professors with their idiosyncrasy. Professor is a professor. There's a limitation there. But you should get some industry experts in that can say, this are the things I found lacking in the last graduate that I employed, and this is what I will prescribe for that graduate to have the skill set necessary to do the work in my company. One of the ways Covenant University is filling that gap is we have what we call the town and gown. This is a regular thing we do. As we speak, Professor Oluwatobi is giving a 5-course seminar series for engineers, both in Covenant University and Landmark University, how you can source and get grants from the industry. I think he gave the second in the series of 5 yesterday. So you have to bring these people in to come and show what they see lacking there. A lot of academics had no industry experience. There was a time, I believe, Corin was even suggesting that professors should take sabbatical if they've never been in the industry, go to the industry, go and consult with them, go and see what's happening in the industry, go and fish out their problems, bring them back to the lab, work on it for them, and let them go. Another thing I believe should happen if the higher education institution is to be relevant the way it is in the future is to morph gradually, but eventually into research-intensive institutions. Research-intensive institutions. Incidentally, that is exactly what Covenant University has. Our plan is to transition over like 5-6 years from a predominantly teaching institution to a research institution. Why? That is where innovation happens. Everything we're teaching at a lower level, these are information that can be gotten easily these days. The basics are there everywhere. You don't have to have a BSc to prove that some people don't have the BSc, they have better understanding of these basic concepts we're talking about. That's why people like Google and the rest of them, they may not even ask for your certificates anymore. It's what you can do. So we must morph gradually. I believe the inertia will be there, the resistance will be there, but with the willpower, we're able to do it into research-intensive institutions. Why this happened for Covenant University as a strategy thing that we put in our strategic document, strategic plan document, is we were looking at Caltech. And that was when we first started with the race of being one of the top 10 institutions in the world by 2022. We found that Caltech was #1 for 5 consecutive years. So we started studying Caltech. Well, what makes Caltech so interesting? Caltech is a very small institution. So small, I think they have like 1,000 plus undergraduates and like 2,000 thereabout postgraduate. But for such a small institution, they had, the last time I checked, like 900 professors. What are they doing? Research, real research. The propulsion lab is there in Caltech for NASA and things like that. So we have to morph into deep research institutions, not only in the technology aspect, it could be in the humanities and the rest of them. We have to place a high premium on outcomes of learning and not on testing. On outcomes of learning rather than testing. The way the higher education institutions are today, how am I doing for time?
So I mean, I can tell you that you can use just about 5 more minutes or 7.
Thank you very much. We have to focus more on the learning outcomes rather than the testing. And this becomes very, very important because people learn at different paces. So the fact that somebody is a slow learner doesn't make him a dumb learner. Give him the amount of time he needs to get that same concept. He will get it maybe even better than the person who gets it fast and drops it and moves on. So we need to focus on learning outcomes and see how students are actually getting these learning outcomes rather than on the testing. And that's one thing I like about the Coursera platform, in that they have this thing they call the peer review. You do a test there. If somebody has taken that test at that particular time that is reviewing your work, working with the notion that you learn by teaching, okay? We have to develop methods and methodologies for, that's what I've just said, different paced learners. We have to be, I said that, more liberal, less rigid in policy formulations. That is very, very, very important. Less rigid in policy formulations. We have to adopt, this may sound, because I'm the Vice Chancellor of Covenant, I'm prescribing Covenant as the best institution or something. No, it's because I was privileged to see how it started, the things that were done at the beginning, and where we are today in 17 years. I believe there are some things are working, and those things can be adopted. And what are those things? Look at our core values. Build the man will build the nation. It's as simple as that. What is the issue we have today at the highest echelon of powers is a leadership problem. So if you put the right leadership traits in people, I was hearing some things about embezzling and things like that. If these people just care a bit for their constituency, things like this will not be an issue, because these are things that we even want to do with their own funds from the spirit of sacrifice, which is our 7th core value. Okay, so there are some things that can be adopted from the Covenant University philosophy. And life applicable research, I still believe, is very, very important, if only because we are in Africa and we have a myriad of problems. So esoteric research may not be what we want in Africa for now. We can leapfrog into that, and I can give you examples very easily of leapfrogging. The funds are there in the West. They do this research. They come up with the technologies. So it so happened that very few people in Nigeria had landlines, and the teledensity is now more than the population. Why? Because we leapfrog into the GSM technology. Okay, and things like that, we can leapfrog, but let's do life applicable research. I will be very interested in a research that is helping the agrotech, for example. How do you get more yields from the same parcel of land? How do you increase the yield and things like that? And good news is that we have our own graduates working in that area, people like the CEO of Tribal Greek and the rest of them. So these are my submissions. I'm open for the deliberations, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that may be thrown my way. Thank you for the privilege to share my views.
Thank you so much, sir. I mean, it's a great privilege hearing from you again. And as usual, you've always championed the cause of free your mind. If you remember some of your lecture notes, at the bottom of it, you will always have free your mind. So you've always been one person who has championed open-mindedness all of the time. I mean, you said some very instructive things, sir. You mentioned that we're moving from instruction to facilitation, and knowledge acquisition and skill development should be the things now that faculty members should begin to look out for. Let me just give the latest update on Caltech that you were trying to mention the other time just now, sir. Caltech has 2,238 students, of which 938 of them are undergraduates. Just 938 are undergraduate, 2,238 total population, of which less than 1,000 are undergraduates. And the university has 900 academic members. 900. So it's more like one academic member to one undergraduate student, as its case may be. And so one of the things that Time Higher Education mentioned, when Time Higher Education talked about Caltech being #1 in the world, he mentioned 10 things about them. He says they are very small. He said they are very interdisciplinary. They hire scholars extremely carefully. He says also that #4, they offer real freedom and strong support for junior faculty. #5 thing they said about them is that the senior administrators are also active researchers. That senior administrators are also active researchers. #6, while Caltech is #1, is that undergraduates are given real research opportunities. At #7, he said its management system is flat. It's not hierarchical, as we see in most part of the African continent. On #8, it said it has persuaded some major philanthropists to part with large sums of money. That's one of the things that Caltech has done that has made her #1. #9, THE says Caltech is #1 because its research is resolutely focused on fundamental inquiry, talking about those esoteric things that you mentioned, that Bosun also mentioned. #10, they said the reason Caltech is #1 in the world is because the entire system is based on trust. The honor code, the core values are very well stipulated. And having said that, sir, I want to say thank you. I also submit here that Google is no longer asking for certificates. Google recently published and said their own digital learning platforms would now be equivalent to 4 years in any higher institution. And very soon, people would ditch universities as they are right now and begin to take certification from the Ciscos of this world, from the Googles of this world, and have access to do phenomenal things. And having said that, it's been a pleasure for me anchoring up until this point. It's now time for me to hand over to Nora. Nora, are you there? And just before I hand over to you, Nora, it's important to remind the participants that the Q&A button is still there. Please use that platform to share your questions, and the answers will also be shared there. Nora, I'm waiting to have you come on so I can leave the space for you. All the way from South Africa. How are you, Nora?
I'm so well, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. My goodness, we are in wonderful company, such wonderful intellectual engagement happening here, and all about topics that are so relevant to our continent, not only to any of our individual countries, but to our continent. And
Right.
in that sense, I'm so pleased to be able to join in this conversation.
All right, just before I hand over to you, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Nora is the Director of Entrepreneurship Development in Higher Education, Universities in South Africa. It's a collaborative initiative that involves the support and participation of the 26 public universities, private sector, and other public entities and entrepreneurship support organizations in that part of the world. She's also the founder of AfroLead, a business initiative focused on the economic empowerment of young women who are not yet employed, talking about helping women grow. They offer, a group that offers an immersive 1-month live-in model of training and mentorship for work readiness, entrepreneurship, and sustainable skills. And Nora holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Pretoria, and she's a PhD holder as well from the University of Johannesburg. I think the only person who's not a PhD holder here, but is doing so much work in PhDs, is Temie. Temie, so we are challenging you to go for your PhD. Bosun is about to complete his. Everybody here has a PhD. So Temie, the challenge, you take it up from here and go ahead. So Nora, it's over to you, and I wish you all the time. Dr. Stephen, thank you for having me on this call, and all the best. Bye.
Thank you so much, and for these kind words and the introduction. And I just want to do a shout out to you, Temie, first. I think you have a PhD in life life bank, you know, life bank and life and blood as the symbol of life. I mean, what you are doing is so remarkable. You
PhD
have
in life,
PhD.
in life bank, yeah.
Yes, you definitely are a PhD holder in your own right. Please don't stop to do a PhD. Don't tell the other university entities that I'm discouraging you from doing a PhD. Don't stop to do a PhD at the expense of the fantastic work that you are doing. Such innovation, which is so dearly needed in our world. So congratulations to you on that. That's just a women conversation we're having here on the side. But to get to the esteemed colleagues that we have been hearing here and seeing here today, my goodness, what an important conversation, and what interesting perspectives and overlaps that we see here in the different voices represented. So I'm going to set my timer here to just ensure that we stick to the 15 minutes that we have, or the 20 minutes that we have been given for this panel discussion, because I have seen in the Q&A and noted such important questions coming from the audience. And in that sense, I'm so glad that Ngozi is helping us to monitor the questions. I might not multitask so well. So with that said, I would like to perhaps start with our esteemed Vice Chancellor. First of all, let's start at the end, because you, Professor, you did such a wonderful wrap up and touched on so many important points made by the other panelists. And some of these are also aspects that are certainly true for other universities on the continent and for South African universities in particular. My own role is in Universities South Africa, and that is the representative organization of the 26 public universities in South Africa. My specific focus is on entrepreneurship development, but I want to say that we touch on so many common elements. And I would like to just first start with a couple of observations based on what you had mentioned. I want to firstly commend you for the wonderful performance of the university in the recent rankings. That's fantastic, excellent performance. And I also like and appreciate the different aspects that have been pointed out here. By the way, if you hear sounds, my dogs are in the room with me. Someone let them in. I'm so sorry for this. A wonderful, wonderful achievement for Covenant University. And then I also want to reflect on the position you took on the changed role and the changing role of the educator, but specifically the educator as researcher, and then the increasing emphasis on research and your motivation for repositioning universities increasingly for research, because research is where innovation happens. So when we talk about where innovation happens and the research, of course, Bosun, we're going to have to touch on your rather strong statements you made there in terms of entrepreneurship, because I just want to warn you, I'm with Stephen here. So, so I just wanted to say that we're going to come back to the role of entrepreneurship. But to start with, I would like to ask our Professor Atayero to just give us a bit more of a perspective on the connection between industry partnerships. Bosun spoke about collaboration as well, and we saw in Temie's talk, we heard the important role of her collaboration with an entity like Johnson & Johnson, for example. So if we were to talk about partnerships and collaboration with industry, what are the barriers to getting universities to open up more to include industry and private sector in this wonderful space of innovation? May I direct that question to you, Professor Atayero?
Thank you very much, Laura. There's something with academia, and that thing, tradition. There is no academia without tradition. Actually, we pride ourselves on it, that we are an academic institution and we have our traditions that make us what we believe we have. You agree with me that it wasn't long ago that universities were referred to as hybrid towers for one singular reason, because the level of research, the level of investigations going on is to the point that we kind of secluded, the university secluded itself almost from the society. A professor saw nothing wrong using the same jacket all year round, because it wasn't about looking flashy. It would have been a misnomer to say professor dressed the way I'm dressed now. I still remember my home professor, with all his wherewithals in Moscow, he will not buy a car. He will always use public transport. Why? Because there's this, gives some kind of pride. And that has been a very strong inhibiting factor for academia to open up, to come down from that ivory tower, to mingle with the mortals, if you will, and to see what is going on in the society and actually effect change in the society. That said, that was in the past. Things have changed significantly because institutions, especially private institutions, know that apart from the teaching, research, community development you're doing, there must be a measure of impact. You must be able to show how you are impacting your society. So tradition being the barrier that it was, those barriers are eroding and eroding very fast. I don't think of the 70 plus private institutions in Nigeria now. There is a Senate that will say, do not partner with industry. Actually, the reverse is the case. Those barriers are almost totally down. I'm a communications engineer. One of the things we're doing in communication engineering at Korea now is the OBE learning model, where you have to incorporate the industry. That's one of the reasons I gave that example I gave. We have an industry professor now, Professor Hashiro, sharing seminars with our 2 universities, because he first was in academia. He went into the industry. Now he's an entrepreneur and he's trying to show the people how to win grants from the outside. So that barrier is coming down, because we understand that the days of the ivory tower is gone. And you just have to infuse an element of entrepreneurship into everybody. Because like it or not, everybody is selling something. You have to sell something. We were selling knowledge.
Yes.
We were selling knowledge, but knowledge has been taken out of our hands now with technology. Knowledge is now ubiquitous. So we have to find a way of selling in something else. And that means you have to partner with the industry, find out their problems, and find out how you can resolve those problems for them, even while you're making your own academic progress. So barriers are not as pronounced as they used to be anymore.
Very, very interesting and very encouraging to hear that from you. I think in our own context in South Africa, we find that the actual physical barriers around universities for the sake of security matters, for example, deter external stakeholders from engaging with universities in many ways. So it's wonderful that we are increasingly engaging through virtual platforms such as these as well. And I like the fact that you emphasize the aspect of relevance in what we do as universities to make ourselves attractive partners also to industry. And I was wondering, with that in mind, Temie, whether you would perhaps like to comment for us on what you had what you would advise, having worked closely with a partner such as Johnson & Johnson, and still emphasizing the importance of research and innovation in your engagement, and specifically in LifeBank. What would you advise us as university stakeholders to do to make ourselves more approachable and more attractive to partners who want to innovate with us?
Temie is no longer on the call.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, she had to leave at 1 o'clock.
Thank you for that information. Maybe there's someone else who would like to comment. I think, Bosun, this is a good one for you as well, because you wear many different hats. You've been around the block, as we say. You've been in so many different roles and different perspectives. Could you perhaps comment on that that very important matter of partnership and collaboration between university and private sector or industry?
No, absolutely. I've worked with, in the last 10 years, I've probably worked with over 150 startups on the continent. Even LifeBank, I was the first investor in LifeBank, when it was just an idea. And, it's something that I think there's a huge misunderstanding on the part of the academic institutions on the role that universities and academic institutions can actually play in business. I think academic institutions leave a lot on the table, for not engaging, because the reality is that the business environment is extremely competitive. Every business is constantly looking for ways to be unique, to be different. And when you look to the startup world, this is the part of the startup world in the West, in Silicon Valley, that people don't often hear about. You hear about that young dropout from a university that's built a successful startup, but you actually don't hear about how much of academic research results goes into some of these cutting-edge technology solutions that the startups are building. For every successful technology company, there's a strong relationship with an academic institution around a certain research from somewhere. Google is a perfect example. The algorithm that was used to build Google came out of the university research. The founders were PhDs, right? So that assumption that, successful startup is just all about creativity is not deep. Startups who don't dig deep and look for unique knowledge struggle. And that's what you start to see even in Africa, where companies are now looking for superior expertise. Even our banking sector, that you may think there's no R&D, there's a lot of R&D going on. But what they do is to import that knowledge from outside of the continent. They go to Asia, they used to go a lot to Europe. They bring that superior knowledge into their operations. And I think what needs to start to shift within university, perhaps, is first the need to set up a unit that is responsible for helping the university understand its strength, but also helping the university understand the gap that exists in society for knowledge, then building a unit that can support academic researchers to see how they can apply their academic research in a business environment, because you're not going to overnight convert academic researchers into people who understand business. This has been my own thesis. It will never be like that. And from my experience in business as well, you actually don't need everyone to be entrepreneurs. I have facts to back this up. You don't need everyone to be entrepreneurs. It's a distraction, because the entrepreneurs don't pay attention to that deep knowledge that you need for competitiveness to be. They commercialize things. So you need that unique office. I think every university should have that office that is constantly looking at what research project are we currently doing in our university? What's the strength of that research project? What's the state of the art in that research project? And now we pushing the boundaries of the state of the art. And where can the knowledge be applied? And that unit then becomes the unit that is doing the connection between industry, but also academia, but also helping to find home for all the innovation that is happening within university. I think that's one way academic institution needs to start to see opportunity for taking research to market.
Thank you so much. Very interesting perspective there. And you emphasized and pointed out again that we should not see entrepreneurship really as a solution to everything. And back to that point where you disagreed in a sense from Stephen's perspective. Stephen, I think it's only fair that we give you the mic now and that we say, would you like to share what your perspective was at that stage, and whether that is what you meant. So please share your thoughts there with us in terms of the focus on innovation in its many faces. I think let's frame that question against the background of the emerging role of universities that Bosun had emphasized. You know, he spoke about the exploration of the nexus of technology and society. Wow, what an interesting angle. The encouragement of collaboration with the private sector, something that I'm really advocating for. And then thirdly, he said fostering entrepreneurship, and then he didn't want to spend too much more time there because he thought that you had covered that. And then, of course, all of that in the context of the promotion of diversity, because such beautiful innovation can happen in a diverse and rich setting. So, Stephen, against that background, let's hear from you again on your response to Bosun's observations.
Thank you so much, Nara. Every single person on this panel, thankfully, they were all carefully chosen because, you know, we can't all see all angles all at the same time. We leverage on the perspectives of other persons so that we can see the whole picture all at once. I actually agree with Bosun. I agree with him. And maybe my presentation, I zoomed in a lot on entrepreneurship. I didn't actually mean that it's all about entrepreneurship. Because it's just one part of the pie. There are other angles that need to be addressed. Like Bosun rightly mentioned, entrepreneurs don't have that time to go deep into research. There are those who have that time and passion to really go deep dive, to really figure out what exactly is the core solution that we can call really exceptional, unique right here. That's why I mentioned collaboration is extremely key. I was trying to emphasize that universities should be entrepreneurial, should cultivate entrepreneurially minded persons, whether they end up as entrepreneurs or not, from the faculty angle and also the student angle, because even the students could be at risk if the faculty or educator is not even in the right position to properly deliver the insights and the knowledge, because I mean, it takes a king to make another king. If we are trying to solve a major problem in Africa, then our approach has to be different. And when the Vice Chancellor of Covenant University was making his presentation, he mentioned, you know, roles that educators also need to play. So I actually agree with Bosun. Collaboration needs to be fostered. There are other angles we need to explore. It's not just about entrepreneurship. So my idea basically is to ensure that we are helping to create persons who know how to see problems differently, because that's where the entrepreneurial mindset comes in. So we don't just see problems and really complain about them, but we're doing something about them. And so that's just one fraction of the innovation, you know, picture. It's not all that there is. So I see being entrepreneurial, a fraction that is part of that innovation ecosystem, not the entire picture or answer in itself. So I actually agree with Bosun on that. So we're kind of like saying the same thing. I just zoomed in on one part of the sector.
Fantastic. I kind of thought that you would take that line, Stephen. So colleagues, just to give you a bit of background, Stephen has been very, very generous in accompanying a South African delegation on a virtual international tour. Firstly, he was one of our first VIP speakers to help us in our process of defining where we are going now in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation and commercialization, of course. But he joined our tour, and he had become, you know, the South African stakeholders had become really fond of Stephen and his thinking. So Bosun, you will understand that we are behind him, but now we see we are behind both of you because you are actually in agreement. So that's fantastic. So I want to move on, Bosun, to a very important aspect, and that is this aspect that you touched on about commercialization. So you said something interesting about innovation being the result of invention and commercialization. And you made the distinction between those two aspects, which is so important. You also probably have problems with the fact that people sometimes use the word innovation when they actually describe invention. And then you highlighted the emphasis on basic research, which should lead to applied research. I think in our conversation today, we've heard a lot of thinking about the fact that we need to move from theory to practice for impact. So if that is where we are going, that is what we should be doing. And my question to you now would be against that background. And again, as universities, what should we be doing actively? Perhaps in a concise nutshell approach, what should we be doing actively to get this process streamlined? It's as if in universities we are often caught in one aspect or the other. You know, commercialization is something mystical that happens there right at the end. Nobody in many cases don't even know who in the university is actually responsible for commercialization or what it means. How do we build that pipeline from basic research to all the way to commercialization that creates opportunities for students, that create opportunities for prosperity, as to use one of the words Stephen uses, prosperity, wealth creation in our societies?
Absolutely. I think Prof actually shared the answer to that question. But obviously, because he mentioned it in passing, because of time, he couldn't build on it. But I'm happy to build on it. So in Africa, and this is unique to Africa, and it's been well documented in innovation literature, right? So, you know, there are so many approaches to technological progress in society. For those who have robust innovation systems where everything is well developed, they can go into balancing investments and the approach in basic and applied. But for a lot of African countries, I think South Africa is quite advanced, but even South Africa still engage in quite a bit of basic research, deep basic research, because, you know, I'm an expert in Horizon 2020, even from when it was FP6, FP7. So I know South Africa does a lot of participation in that space. But what I think we can do as a continent is to focus on either what they call catch-up, you know, the catch-up part of innovation progress, or simply say technology transfer. And there's still a lot of research element within that, which is there are tons of research results that exist elsewhere in the world on the shelves, you know, as reports in so many universities. And a lot of this knowledge can actually be the foundation to a lot of problems that we face on the continent. So in a continent where we have very little progress in basic research, I think the right way to encourage people to do more proper research for society is by focusing first on demonstrating value through applied research. How can we engage more of our academic researchers in research projects that will lead more to what is called demonstration of knowledge? So you have a basic knowledge that is already generated. Another researcher is looking to do applied research. Can we get more African universities and researchers collaborating with researchers globally through collaborative research to do projects that leads them more into applied research? And one of the ways for this is actually through the Horizon 2020, which the European government funds significantly. I used to be a consultant for this funding scheme. South Africa is the leading participant in Africa. I think as of 2 years ago, South Africa was doing roughly 150 projects, and Nigeria was doing probably 5 or 6 or 7 projects. So it's about, I think it's South Africa, then you have Kenya as part of it and a few other countries. But there's opportunity, and this brings in resources into the university as well. But not just resources, there's opportunity for the university researchers to participate in applied research. And by participating in applied research, they get taken the route of the basic research that led to that knowledge that they're applying. CCOB is, for instance, participating in the project with EPFL in Switzerland. which is a University of Twente in Netherlands, then 2 other companies in Republic of Benin and Kenya. But we also brought the Tai Sholari University of Education as an associate partner through us into this project. And what the project is all about is how do we change the way we teach in secondary schools, especially science, from instructional way of teaching, which is following the rote learning approach, to inquiry learning, right? And its proper application, where we're actually training teachers in so many schools across Nigeria, Kenya, and Republic of Benin to take this approach. But in the process of doing that, we've also now ended up setting up an innovation lab in Tai Sholari University. And a part of the thesis for that is, what's the core of inquiry learning, and how do you teach teachers to take inquiry approach to teaching as against the rote learning approach? So you can see that what we end up doing there is we start to inspire more researchers within the universities to actually believe that the results of their research projects can help society. So I think that's one way we need to look at it. Can we do more collaborative research projects? Can we get more of our researchers doing collaborative research? And from what I said in the last question, that can be part of the role that research and commercialization office is doing, helping find research, collaborative research opportunity globally that academic researchers within universities can take advantage of.
Very nicely captured there, and I think it speaks to one of the questions that one of our audience members had posed, and that was the question about diversity. The question was that you had talked, while we have you there, Bosun, you had talked about diversity, and the question was, are you encouraging multidisciplinary research activities? And then the question, are Nigerian universities doing enough in that regard? That's an interesting one, because, you know, in universities, we kind of like to stick to our own disciplines, you know, our own building, our own passage, our own colleagues, our own tea rooms, you know. So what do we do what do we do about this matter of multidisciplinary research? Is it something that you had considered there?
I have, and I think, again, not pushing too much on this applied research thing, but I think everyone in the panel agreed to this anyways, is when you actually do applied research, you do not have a choice but to be multidisciplinary. You know, Prof mentioned interest of the university in agricultural technology and innovation, for instance. That's one area where you're seeing significant diversity in the way innovation is being looked at. Trevor Greek that was mentioned, I'm pretty sure that the CEO did not study anything on agriculture, but the CEO brought the application of technology and financial services to disrupt and make funding available to farmers such that they can produce more. You know, so when you're looking at a problem like that, solving that problem is not only enough for you to go to the farmers and say, you know, this is how you need to produce to get more yields. But even when you're teaching them that, who's going to help them to access more funding? Who's going to help them to access more market? That needs a lot of diversity in the way you think. One thing that we did recently with Airbus, which is a company that makes an airplane, we had an innovation challenge, and the bulk of the startups in this challenge were agriculture startups. There's one from South Africa as well within the cohort. And what they were doing was using satellite technology to help farmers to improve yields. You know, so you had one in South Africa that was using this technology with an app to help cattle rearers to get the best out of their cattle, because each cow is tagged and they use satellite technology to monitor the cow, and the farmer can see everything. So you can see that such innovation is not going to require a cattle rearer alone. You know, it's going to require so many. So this is the beauty of applied research. Basic research, you can still hide in your laboratory and do the work alone. But when you have to do applied research, you start to think of the soft issues within the technology you're trying to apply. You start to think of things like funding, who's going to fund it. You start to think of the entire value chain of the innovation, and that's where diversity comes to play.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking of the marketing aspects as well, that is so often overlooked. Marketing and sales, we sometimes look down on sales skills as well, and just bringing in those right skill sets to also help us promote what we are doing. So I want to speak now in response to that, and still against the backdrop of research. Professor Atayero, so there was a question from Professor Tsidi Mwapalua, who is a colleague of ours. I was surprised to see her in the meeting. Welcome, Tsidi. So from Rhodes University in the Eastern Cape, and she had a question on, in response to your presentation, on how can research-intensive universities shift their research that matters from invention to commercialization. So, Professor, would you like to respond to Tsidi's question?
Thank you very much, Rich, for the question. How can we move from invention to commercialization? I'll just throw light on how we try to address that in Covenant University. But before I answer that, if I may just make a quick maybe remark on what Bosun said. I believe it's a very, very good suggestion. I don't know if other vice chancellors are on this call. If they don't have such in their institutions, this is why the town gown thing is very, very important. You have somebody with the type of ideas and experience that he has, trying to infuse some things into the way we do things, and that's how things will move forward. You need to study the gap, the strength of the research in the institution, and the area of applicability, how to fill that gap. We have something like that in Covenant University that we call the Covenant University Center for Research, Innovation, and Discoveries. Actually, incidentally, Stephen is a deputy director in that center. So one of the, and making him a deputy director is very, very strategic because of his ties with the industry. I believe the first interaction with Bosun of Covenant University was through Stephen, if I'm not mistaken. And it makes sure that whatever he's doing, so we even allowed Stephen to have his own kind of a baby in Covenant University that we call the Hebron Startup Lab. And the assignment of the Startup Lab is to see how our students are very, very talented, not even talking about the researchers now, the students, the things they can come up with. So how do we nurture them from that stage of ideation to the processes, to mentor them? And I'm sure quite a number of them went through mentorship under the CC Help True. So how do you move it to create centers like this where the research is looked at? Very recently, one of the things with administration saddled the COCRID, the Center for Research with, is to identify 5 projects that they think is worthy of investment in a little seed grant, maybe 5 million naira each, just to kick it off. So they sent out a call, people participated. So this is how you force people out of their shell. Put some monetary value on it. Say, we help you with some seed fund to test the principle, is it working, before we can now apply for a bigger grant. In the books of Covenant University, we even have what we call the seed grant. If you have an idea, you want to go and get some preliminary data, proof of concept to build. If it's below 1 million naira, just send a very small proposal. We fund it for you to go and test that idea. Then if it is actually working, then you can now apply for a full-fledged research grant. So that's one of the ways you can do it. Put some incentive on it. Take it away from just the publication. You need to publish, but that should happen naturally because you are working in research. But beyond publication, beyond the tenor, when the tenor is satisfied, what else can you do? How do you solve the larger societal problems? Which is what this question is trying to address. And that's what we do at Covenant. We put some incentive on it. We help the researchers have the proof of principle, and they can move on from it. And that's actually very recently, we won a grant, one of the African Center of Excellence grants in bioinformatics and communication from the World Bank. How did it start? There was an initial grant some years back on malaria from Covenant University. That's how it started. Then the bioinformatics center in West Africa was developed through that, and that's what morphed now into this grant we have from the World Bank. And what is the idea of this now is to make sure that we have enough faculty and competence to do real research in Africa. That's the objective of the HACE. So it's incentivizing is very, very important in making this happen. And in the process of incentivizing, they get this mentorship they need. And if they don't have that selling ability that you mentioned, they get it one way or the other, either through the HSL or actually partnering with the industry. Stephen is the deputy director in charge of linkages with the industry. So you get that type of mentorship you want and things like that.
Professor, that is so interesting. And I think we've got so much to learn from your approach. The model is wonderful. I mean, the fact that you make available the small seed grants, I say small, I'm sure that there are different sized grants there as well, but it allows us, your staff, it gives your staff and your researchers an opportunity to just go to the next step. I think that is fantastic. And Stephen also touched on the matter of incentives when he was speaking. So Stephen, you touched on in your presentation, you also touched on incentives, but I think the first question I want to bring to you from our audience is not on that. That question is more on the matter of moving from one level to the other. You know, in your presentation, you mentioned the levels, and our question relates, for example, to moving from theoretical to level 2. How can universities move in that way, shift if you want? Your thoughts on that, please, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Nora. I think from the conversations, a number of the points have been shared from the other panelists. I heard Professor Atayero, he mentioned a few of them, but also mentioned some of them. But I'll just point out and maybe just kind of like buttress on maybe some of that. One of it is the need to escape from this pride of knowledge. Oh, I don't know how best to express it. So there's this pridefulness in the academia that celebrates the theoreticals without giving attention to how this actually affects the lives of mere mortals and transforms the lives of people. And that's one of the things that I mentioned about when I said research beyond the shelf. So if, for instance, we're trying to find out something, we shouldn't just begin to measure our success based on what we discovered. But how can we use discoveries to actually affect the lives of others? So that process kind of like helps to shift our mindset. It also helps to shift the culture. And if truly we want to really affect the lives of people with the things we've discovered, then it just makes sense to say that who are those that are really good at executing discoveries, ideas? I mean, those are the persons who have an industry. Those are the entrepreneurs, the startups, the people who understand how the market works. So it just makes sense to collaborate. And that's why I said there's a point you get to in the culture where you have to escape and get yourself free from being isolated. Instead of being isolated from reality, I mean, this is the time to collaborate with the industry. I mean, TCOB is doing an amazing job in building an ecosystem, not just a startup, like building an ecosystem. And an ecosystem is made up of quite a number of players. Looking at the instances that he gave, I mean, Temie also is part of such ecosystem. So the collaboration has to be in place. It's not the university in its own world or the industry in its own world, the innovators in their own world. But by the time we begin to collaborate, there is this exchange of knowledge. The industry needs some ideas to execute. The university has that. The university has lots of ideas that need to be executed. I mean, why then operate in isolation? Let's come together. Resources are available somewhere. So how can we all win by working together? And so the collaboration is actually key. In fact, I think that it's the collaboration that helps to level out and help the culture to improve. And that's how we change and move on the various levels of the culture as we begin to collaborate. Because the time will come that a professor, because of his relationship with industry, what he teaches in class starts to change. What his students get kind of like changes. I mean, in addition to that, like in the case of the Google guys, I mean, their project supervisor literally introduced them to the first investor in Google, who gave them $100,000. So, I mean, that's kind of relationship that a professor has with even with the industry gives him links and access to other investors, angel investors, venture capitalists. Something interesting is in place, maybe from research, whether by student or by faculty who has been doing some kind of research. That kind of like trickles down because there is a bridge, there is a connection with industry, there is the collaboration already in place. So that's why I said collaboration is one strong aspect that needs to be done. In fact, one of the reasons for this particular program is to basically emphasize the need for collaboration. It's extremely crucial. Extremely crucial because the culture that higher education institutions have embraced for years needs to be revisited, and we need to begin to, particularly now that the problems in society kind of like is one that demands like people to work together to really get the kind of results that we need, so we can solve the problems and find how they can be sustainable, make money in the process, and get things a lot more stabilized. So collaboration is one vital aspect I'd like to emphasize on.
Thank you so much. It seems like that is really one of the key themes in our conversation today. This is very, very useful. I just want to check with the organizing panel chair, also with you, whether there is time for another 2 or 3 questions, perhaps?
I think we can still take 3 more.
3 more?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Fantastic. So what we see, what we have here is, Stephen, so you just wrapping up, this is a quick one for you because you touched on this already. What can we do to change the theoretical culture of teaching in Nigeria to be more entrepreneurial, to be a more entrepreneurial culture? What would your response be there?
Okay, so maybe I'll just share 2 things. The first will be to say, maybe we might need to redefine how we measure success. So for now, the way the performance of the researcher is being measured is based on mostly, in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases is to publish articles and to get maybe promoted because of the articles that you have published. And so, lots of, and that's just basic principle. Whatever you want to promote, you incentivize with some form of reward. So how can we begin to help faculty members, researchers begin to see other kinds of incentives that will help them look beyond just publishing whatever they have discovered, to also going beyond the theoreticals and looking at where the real impact is and really touching society. So that's one. The other aspect is the aspect of being more infused and immersed in industry. I like what Professor Atayero mentioned. He talked about the Covenant University's plan on town and gown. Like Covenant University has a town and gown project for the sake of having that mix between the town and the gown. And so it's also crucial to say that for researchers and faculty members, they might need to even go on internships in industry. I mean, that might look kind of like belittling, but it's actually not belittling. We're in the age where knowledge is so vast that we all need to learn even by doing. So even I don't see anything wrong in a professor going on sabbatical in industry, even to go and study, to go and understudy things, even to go and intern sort of in the industry, particularly in the area where he wants to really find out, where he has real questions and look at where the issues are. In the process, we are better able to understand what the problems are, and research should be based on what the problems are. And so discoveries from such research will help us, crack the solutions. Industry, who is interested in the solution can be able to fund it. Everyone working together, it can lead to whether a spin-off, a startup, or a kind of product or a project. It can end up becoming something like a Google that becomes valued at maybe $1 trillion or something, and then prosperity is shared, and we can all grow and do things together. So that collaboration can come in various ways. So this is just some of the ways that I think.
Thank you, Stephen. So there's an interesting question here, which I'm going to make this our second last question. And let's pose this question to you, Bosun, because the question is framed as this. I would like to thank, okay, it is true that our academic research is finding it difficult to move from concept to impact. Can either Stephen or Bosun help explain how this ugly trend can be reversed? Right. So Stephen could answer. Stephen, who would like to answer? Would you like to answer? Bosun, would you like to answer?
I think Bosun should answer.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you.
I think I can answer, and the reason for answering is not just because I'm pulling this off my my somewhere. You know, this is something I've worked on for a while as well, because I'm a true believer in the role of universities and academic institutions. And I think the solution is in what we've discussed so far. I think there's a need for clear incentives, right? In the academic world, especially say in Nigeria, but also on the African continent as well. And part of it is because that there's currently, there's disincentive in place, right? So you have to treat down its head if you want to see a change. The current incentive is that for you to get promoted as an academia in Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, and I think Prof confirmed this as well, you have to publish. That's all you have to do. And you know, the challenge with that is the recipe is already known to people. So the motivation for publishing in itself is not a productive one. I am publishing because, you know, if I need to be an associate prof, all I have to do is publish, show that I've published. I am publishing because I want to be a professor someday. And if that's my objective, especially in a country or continent where traditionally innovation is not being celebrated, right? So there's no path for me doing a research that can lead into an invention that can change the world and probably then bring some kind of gains to my institution and probably to me as a person. There's no record to point at. A lot of academic researchers within their universities in a country like Nigeria cannot point to another colleague that has invented something that's changed the world and it's impacted them positively. I think the best most people can see are academias who are consultants to development agency, and they make a lot of money from there. So that's the example people see. So the incentive is very minimal. So I think there needs to be a collective effort to put the incentive there from leadership at both the individual academic level, but also at the maybe I think NCC should be the commission that is responsible for that. For us to start to say there's a major role for academic research in society. So there's first a need for that. I have a presentation on this. Sorry, I need to close my windows. I need to close my windows. I have a presentation on this, which shows it's a business case for academic research. I think we need to make a business case for academic research. Once we're able to do that, then we can then build up an incentive for academic researchers to spend their time, also doing research that can add value to society. And for me, it comes back to that unit, which Prof also spoke to, that unit needs to be there because academic researchers will need support. You can't expect them to just transition overnight. So you need, every individual university needs to build that support structure that is able to help them maximize their current expertise, but also project into what expertise as a university do we want to build based on what we see in society as well. I think that will be my suggestion on this one.
Very useful, very useful. Thank you so much. And now our esteemed Vice Chancellor. The question of funding. We can't talk universities without talking funding. Am I right? It's always one of our top considerations in everything is talking about incentives, university funding. In South Africa, Professor, we've been having conversations more and more about increasing the potential revenue streams to universities. What can universities do in the face of decreasing perhaps governmental support, especially now in the face of this COVID-19 pandemic, in the face of financial pressures and looking at third stream income, additional streams of funding for the university. There is this question on what are the new sources of funding that universities or that higher education institutions can leverage. Also, given that in many cases infrastructure decays, and that's a problem in our country as much as it might be in Nigeria, you know, is the one place where we cut costs is often in terms of infrastructure. What can we as universities do to leverage additional income streams and sources of funding?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Covenant University, I'll start from Covenant and I'll move out. Covenant University has a peculiar ecosystem. Covenant University was founded as an arm of a Christian ministry, Living Faith Church Worldwide. And that ministry has a vision of liberation of the Black race, emancipation vision, if you will. And in that vision, one of the hands of achieving the vision of that ministry is to educate the people as a means of emancipation. So Covenant University did not start out as a for-profit, everything is for profit, of course, but did not start out as a for-profit, but rather as a service to humanity. So from the onset, Covenant University never had issues with funding. Even as we speak, Covenant University does not have issues with funding. Let me paint a picture of that. A normal vice chancellor spends about a third of his time in his university. 2/3 is all over the place, looking for funds and things like that. It's not the same case here. I had to present a very strong, compelling case to my board for us to start looking out for other sources of funds because of the peculiarity of the ministry. But the board is on that level now. We know that we need other funds. So that's why we're thinking of research funding. Like I told you, the malaria research, originally, it was totally funded by Covenant University. But from selling this idea to the board, they bought it that we need to look out. We need to show that we're capable of pulling funds. Not that we have funds, not that we're in need of funds, but to maintain the prestige and the reputation of the university, we must show that we can do research that will attract funds. That's why we went out for, and we're getting a lot of funds. We have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds. We have quite a number of funds. So one avenue for increasing the streams into the university is that well-tested, age-long avenue of doing research that matters. If you can do research that matters, there'll be somebody out there willing to pay top dollar for you to do that research, which is why the underlying theme that this webinar is coming to have, talking about collaboration, becomes very, very essential. Stephen just mentioned again, there's nothing wrong with a professor who is so totally used to his esoteric research in his lab to move out to the industry in a sabbatical year instead of going to another university, move out to the industry for the sabbatical year, mingle with the people in the industry, see what are their problems. It could just happen for him that while in that company, he sees something they're struggling with that was a project done by one of his students 7 years ago that is just lying there somewhere on the shelf. So all he has to do is dust that up, write a grant for it. Streams will come into the university. I will believe in Covenant University, and that's one of the key points of transitioning from a predominantly teaching university to a research university, is to make sure that anybody that qualifies for that title, professor of Covenant University, is a grant-winning professor. So to make that happen, we actually tweaked our appointments and promotion criteria document in such a way. It used to be that you just publish and everything, but now we have 3 streams in it. You have the pure teaching professor, you have the combo professor, we call it, that does both teaching and research, and we have the pure research professors. The idea is that at the end of the day, all our professors will be able to bring in grants. So I see that as a major stream of income into the university, doing very good research that is well-funded, and commercialization of the products of such research to become an avenue of getting more streams into the university.
You've given such wonderful guidance here, but I must say, I think many universities envy you the unique position in which Covenant University finds itself, the fact that you have options. But I also like the emphasis that you place on the role of the researcher in providing and creating research that matters. I think we have to start wrapping up this conversation with the esteemed panel. And colleagues, I want to say thank you very much for sharing your thoughts here. I think it is the task is clearly defined for us, ahead of us. I think we have to go and also take what we have discussed here to the students as well, and have these discussions and the innovation discussions in particular with our students. One quick last comment from each of the panelists, please. Let's just do a 2-line comment, please. Shall we start with the Vice Chancellor, please?
Thank you very much. I believe if there should be any take home from here is that innovation is very, very important. And institutions of higher learning, if they are to remain relevant in the future, must, as a matter of urgency, start thinking about disruptive innovation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bosun.
Yeah, I think I'll just follow up on Prof's point, which is also the fact that universities don't have a choice but to stay relevant for the good of our society. The knowledge and the role they play is extremely important for our survival, is extremely important for inclusion, and is extremely important for the development of nations as well. And we need our tertiary institutions in Africa to start to play that role, to lift us all up. We're looking up to them.
Beautiful, inspirational, thank you. And the last word goes to our host, I think our favorite, Stephen. It just looks like we're all rooting for EduStart and for the work that you champion. So last word from in the panel discussion to you, please.
Thank you so much, Nora. I'll just follow suit with the comments of the Vice Chancellor, Covenant University, and what Bosun also shared. The university has a vital role to play, and that's actually what inspired this program, this webinar today. Let's now go and make innovation happen, not in isolation, but let's work in collaboration with the relevant partners, because it's a system that we all need to work with. If we all work together, then we can solve the problems even a lot more sustainably. Thank you so much, Nora.
Thank you. And with that, we wrap up our panel discussion, our Q&A, and over to our chair. Thank you.
Okay, I think he's not around here. I think I'll just stand in for him. Let me use the opportunity to appreciate you, Nora, and to all our panelists and speakers. Thank you so much, Professor Atayero, Vice Chancellor of Covenant University. We deeply appreciate what you shared. Thank you so much, sir. Bosun, thank you so much. I mean, I'm so excited that we had you here. In fact, let me just make a true confession here. Bosun was the first person that came to my mind when we were kind of like creating this because of what he has done around the innovation space and also working with startups, because I just was thinking, how can we actually solve this problem? Who are the persons that the ideas would be relevant in helping us to really make this happen? So thank you so much, Bosun, for making it happen and for making the time to be here. Temie is not here, but I really want to appreciate her in absentia for making our time also to be here to share her thoughts and on the work she has done. I mean, that's a big problem that she's solving. She's solving a very big problem in the space. Thank you so much. So the EduStart team, thank you for helping us and putting this all up together. To all attendees, thank you for coming. I believe you've picked a couple of things so far that has been shared. A report is going to be done from what we've shared today, because it's not just for us to talk, but for us to learn and also take action from the things that have been shared. So a report we put together, and we're going to share such report. So that all of us can learn from and as well as benefit from. So before we close, I would just like us to have two quick polls, which I would like us to basically respond to. So something should pop up on your screen. Kindly help us to attend to that. You can all respond to the polls that we have on the screen. Which of these best describes you? Kindly help us feel that. Just basically two polls and then we wrap up. Thank you so much. All right, so can we just, let's share the results, right? So that's it. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for making our time to be here. I really want to especially appreciate every single one for making it happen. So this is like a vote of thanks, appreciating everyone for the contribution. Thank you so much. Out of your busy schedules, you've taken the time to share thoughts and ideas with us. So this is from EduStart. We'll be making available more details to everyone by email. We know that there are certain gaps that some institutions or universities might have, so we'll definitely send and make some information available. So you will definitely expect some emails from us. You get the report from us, and also some of the things that EduStart does, particularly around cultivating entrepreneurs, providing entrepreneurship education to support universities, to build an entrepreneurship ecosystem, and to also leverage on some of our networks to help improve the entire system. We'll be making that happen because we are working together to ensure that we deliver on a project that we launched this year. We call it the EduStart Reach Project. That's a project to cultivate 50,000 high-growth entrepreneurs and talents to create multi-billion-dollar businesses in Africa. Because out of the problems that Africa faces, we can solve them entrepreneurially. And so we'll be making that available and also share how we can be of support to the various institutions. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for making our time to be here. And thank you for your questions. Thank you for your ideas. Thank you so much, Nora, again. I don't know how many times I'll have to thank you, but I really want to thank you. We still do quite a lot of big things together. Thank you so much. And bye-bye to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.